The wind blowing off the Mediterranean carries a secret, a quiet murmur beneath the rhythmic shushing of the waves. Listen to the water as it meets the shores of North Africa. It is a gentle sound, a timeless sound. For thousands of years, the sea has washed against these golden beaches and rocky cliffs, smoothing the stones, carrying the scent of salt and distant lands. As the sun begins its slow, heavy descent toward the western horizon, the sky transforms into a vast canvas of bruised purple, soft peach, and deep, quiet indigo. The whitewashed walls of the coastal cities catch the fading light, glowing for just a moment with a warm, amber hue before the shadows begin to stretch and lengthen. It is a beautiful, peaceful twilight. But beneath the tranquil surface of this evening, there is a profound stillness. It is not the stillness of rest. It is the stillness of a world holding its breath. Across the cities and the quiet coastal towns, from the bustling port of Casablanca to the winding alleys of Algiers, a heavy, invisible weight settles over the land as night approaches. There are no great battles here in this moment. The sky is empty of roaring engines, and the sand is untouched by the heavy tracks of conflict. Yet, the people who live along this ancient coast know that they are suspended in a delicate, fragile in-between. They are living in the quiet pause between the lightning and the thunder. In a narrow, winding street in Oran, the scent of warm, baking bread drifts through the air, mixing with the fragrance of sea salt and dried jasmine. A baker, an older man with flour dusting the deep creases around his eyes, stands in the doorway of his small shop. He wipes his hands on a faded linen apron and looks out toward the darkening harbor. He does not know the grand strategies of generals in distant capitals. He knows only that the flour shipments are becoming smaller, that the faces of his neighbors are drawn with quiet worry, and that the sea, usually a source of bounty and connection, now feels like a vast, dark curtain hiding an unknown future. He reaches into his pocket, breaks off a small, warm piece of crust from a leftover loaf, and gently tosses it to a stray dog resting in the shadow of the doorway. The dog takes it softly from the cobblestones, looking up at the baker with tired, grateful eyes. It is a small, everyday gesture, a tiny spark of warmth in a world that feels increasingly cold and uncertain. The baker sighs, a soft sound lost in the evening breeze, and pulls the heavy wooden shutters closed. The darkness deepens, rolling gently over the terracotta roofs and the palm trees that sway slowly in the wind. In this shadow, people live under a divided reality. It is a time of whispered conversations and lowered eyes. The government that claims to lead them from across the sea is a fractured, complicated thing, casting a strange, twilight rule over the land. Neighbors do not always know who they can trust. In the corner cafes, men sit with small glasses of sweet mint tea, but the easy, boisterous laughter of the past has been replaced by quiet murmurs. They lean in close, their words barely rising above the clinking of glasses. They speak of rumors, of shadows moving in the night, of a shifting tide they can feel in their bones but cannot yet see. They are ordinary people, fathers and brothers, simply trying to navigate a world that has tipped off its axis. They find their resilience in the quiet routines, the pouring of tea, the sweeping of floors, the tending of small, defiant gardens that bloom even in the dust. Miles away, on a lonely stretch of cliff overlooking the vast, black expanse of the Atlantic, a young soldier sits wrapped in a heavy wool blanket. He is far from his home. He wears a uniform that he puts on every day out of duty, but in the quiet of the night, when the wind howls around the stone walls of the coastal battery, the uniform feels heavy, and the reasons for being here feel distant and blurred. He is sitting by the dim, flickering orange light of a small kerosene lantern. The light dances across a piece of paper resting on a wooden crate. He is holding a fountain pen, watching as a tiny drop of dark blue ink gathers at its tip. He is trying to write a letter to his mother. He wants to tell her about the endless blue of the sky during the day, about the strange, beautiful birds that dive along the cliffs, about the warm, dry wind that smells of cedar and sand. He wants to tell her that he is safe, that he is eating well, that she has no reason to worry. But his hand hovers over the paper. He cannot bring himself to write the words, because his heart is heavy with a quiet, persistent dread. He looks out the small window of the bunker. The ocean is an abyss of black glass. He knows, as they all know, that out there in the dark, something is gathering. The silence of the sea is almost deafening. He feels a profound loneliness, a tiny speck of life on the edge of a massive, indifferent continent, waiting for a storm he cannot control. Finally, he lowers the pen to the paper and simply writes, "I think of you always. The nights are quiet here. We are just waiting." He folds the paper carefully, the crease sharp and precise, and tucks it into his breast pocket, directly over his heart. It is a fragile shield against the vast unknown. This feeling of waiting, of suspended time, weaves its way through the very fabric of the night. It slips through the keyholes of heavy wooden doors and drifts into the quiet courtyards of the Medinas. In a small home in Algiers, the thick walls keep out the chill of the night air. Inside, the only light comes from a single candle on a low wooden table. A mother sits on a woven rug, a pile of worn clothing in her lap. She is slowly, methodically passing a needle and thread through a torn shirt. Beside her, on a thick cushion, 2 young children are fast asleep. Their breathing is soft, deep, and rhythmic, a beautiful, innocent counterpoint to the tension of the adult world. The mother pauses her sewing and reaches out to gently brush a stray curl of hair from her son's forehead. His skin is warm. In his sleep, he is safe. He knows nothing of the shifting borders, the dark warships, or the grand, terrible machinations of the world beyond their door. The mother looks across the room to where her husband sits near a small, wooden radio. The glowing dial casts a faint, greenish light on his face. He turns the knob with agonizing slowness, his ear pressed close to the fabric speaker. He is listening through the ocean of static, past the hisses and pops of the atmosphere, searching for a voice. A whisper from London. A signal from across the Atlantic. Anything to tell them what the future holds. But tonight, the airwaves are as silent and enigmatic as the desert outside. The husband catches his wife's eye in the dim light. He gives a small, tired shake of his head, and turns the radio off. The sudden absence of the static makes the silence in the room feel even heavier. Yet, in that silence, they share a look of deep, quiet understanding. They do not need words. They draw their strength from the simple presence of one another, from the steady breathing of their children, from the undeniable truth that life, no matter how fragile, stubbornly persists. Outside, the wind picks up, rustling the dry fronds of the palm trees. It sweeps across the empty beaches, smoothing away the footprints of the day, leaving the sand perfect, untouched, and waiting. It moves inland, rolling over the dunes of the Sahara, where the night gets cold and the stars burn with a fierce, diamond-like clarity. The sky is so vast here, so overwhelmingly large, that it makes the affairs of humanity seem incredibly small. Under this magnificent, indifferent canopy of stars, millions of souls are doing the exact same thing. They are sleeping fitfully, or sitting awake in the dark, listening to the wind. They are the local farmers praying for rain and peace. They are the tired shopkeepers counting their meager coins. They are the young soldiers in heavy wool coats, staring into the dark waters until their eyes ache. They are all bound together by this strange, shared twilight. They are all carrying the weight of the unknown. They are living in the shadows over the sand, navigating the quiet fears that bloom when the lights go out. There is a strange, melancholy beauty to this moment. It is the beauty of a delicate glass resting right on the edge of a table, just before it falls. It is the beauty of a sharp intake of breath, held tight in the lungs. No one knows what the dawn will bring. No one knows if the sun will rise on a world unchanged, or if the very earth will shake with the arrival of the steel leviathans from the sea. So they wait. The baker sleeps, dreaming of fields of golden wheat. The young soldier rests his head against the cold stone of the bunker, his hand resting over the letter in his pocket. The mother and father lie awake, listening to the soft breathing of their children, wrapping them in a silent, desperate prayer of protection. And the ancient coast of North Africa, with its white cities and endless dunes, its rocky cliffs and whispering winds, simply waits in the dark. The waves continue their eternal, soothing rhythm against the shore. Shush! 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 A lullaby for a world on the brink. A gentle, rhythmic heartbeat in the darkness. The entire coast, the entire world, is asleep with one eye open, wrapped in the shadows over the sand, breathing softly, and waiting for the spark. Deep beneath the sleeping cities, in rooms shadowed by heavy velvet curtains, the fate of thousands is being decided not with shouts of glory, but in quiet, agonizing whispers. Far away from the warm, dark shores of North Africa, a different kind of darkness settles over the grand capitals of the world. In London, the midnight fog rolls thick and cool through the cobblestone streets, wrapping the city in a damp, gray blanket. The street lamps are extinguished, the windows blacked out against the sky, leaving the world above ground to sleep in blind, breathless silence. But below the pavement, buried safe from the turbulent sky, there are rooms where the lights burn long into the early hours of the morning. If you were to walk down the narrow, concrete corridors of these subterranean war rooms, you would not hear the booming voices of conquerors. You would hear only the soft hum of ventilation fans, the rhythmic clacking of a solitary typewriter down the hall, and the muted murmur of tired men speaking in hushed tones. The air in these rooms is heavy, thick with the scent of stale coffee, old paper, and the blue haze of tobacco smoke drifting lazily up toward the low ceiling. At the center of one such room stands a massive wooden table, completely covered by a sprawling paper map. It is a beautiful, intricate map, painted in soft blues for the ocean and gentle ochres for the African desert. To the untrained eye, it is merely a drawing. But to the men standing around it, their collars unbuttoned, their eyes lined with profound exhaustion, it is a terrifying mirror of reality. They look down at the tiny, colored pins pushed into the paper. Red pins. Blue pins. Small, innocuous pieces of metal and plastic. A general leans over the table, resting his weight on his knuckles. His hands are weathered, the hands of a man who grew up working beneath the wide, open skies of the American Midwest. Now, those hands bear the weight of the world. He stares at a cluster of pins hovering just off the coast of Morocco. In the quiet of his own mind, he does not see pins. He sees the faces of the young men he watched boarding the transport ships only days ago. He sees the boy with the freckles who nervously dropped his duffel bag. He sees the young lieutenant who smiled bravely but whose hands trembled as he lit a cigarette. He sees sons, brothers, and fathers, all suspended in the dark waters of the Atlantic, trusting him to guide them to a safe dawn. The general closes his eyes for a long, slow moment. A deep sigh escapes his lips, so quiet it is barely heard over the hum of the room. It is the sigh of a man who knows that no matter how perfectly he plans, no matter how carefully he measures the tides and the phases of the moon, some of those boys will not come home. This is the quiet, crushing agony of command. It is a lonely burden, worn entirely on the inside. To the world, he must be a pillar of absolute certainty, a statue of unwavering resolve. But here, in the dim, amber glow of the desk lamp, he is simply a father sending other men's children into the dark. The heavy wooden door opens with a soft click. A young aide steps into the room, carrying a silver tray with a single, steaming teacup. The aide is barely 20 years old. His uniform is perfectly pressed, his posture straight, but there are dark circles under his eyes, too. He moves quietly, respectfully, placing the warm cup near the general's elbow. The general opens his eyes and looks at the young man. He sees the youth in his soft features, the innocence that war has not yet entirely washed away. "Thank you, son," the general murmurs, his voice a low, gravelly whisper. "You should try to get some sleep, sir," the aide replies softly, his voice trembling just a little with genuine care. "It's past 3 in the morning." The general offers a small, tired smile. "Soon," he promises, though they both know it is not true. He wraps his hands around the porcelain cup, letting the heat seep into his chilled fingers. In this fleeting exchange, there are no ranks, no insignias, no grand strategies. There are only two exhausted human beings sharing a brief, quiet moment of warmth in a cold, metallic room. The aide gives a slight nod and quietly slips back out the door, leaving the general alone once more with the map, the shadows, and his quiet prayers. Across the vast, dark expanse of the Atlantic Ocean, the same heavy stillness hangs over Washington. The air here is different, thick, humid, and clinging to the grand marble monuments that stand like ghosts in the night. Inside the White House, the long corridors are quiet, the carpet swallowing the footsteps of the Secret Service men who stand watch in the shadows. In a high-backed chair near a tall window, the leader of the nation sits entirely alone. The room is dark, save for the pale moonlight filtering through the glass, casting long, silvery rectangles across the floor. He cannot sleep. His body aches with a familiar, weary pain, but it is his mind that refuses to rest. He looks out across the silent lawn, toward the obelisk piercing the night sky. He knows that out there, in millions of homes across the country, mothers and fathers are sleeping peacefully, completely unaware that the greatest armada in history is currently sliding through the black waters toward Africa. He holds a heavy, terrible secret. He knows that in just a few days' time, the telegrams will begin to arrive at front doors in small towns and bustling cities. The yellow envelopes that bring the world crashing down. He slowly turns his wheelchair away from the window, moving toward a small wooden desk. On it sits a single sheet of heavy stationery. He picks up his pen. It is a private ritual, a way to anchor his heart to the ground when the winds of history are howling around him. He does not write of grand alliances or geopolitical necessity. He writes a letter to his wife, who sleeps just down the hall. He writes about the heavy silence of the house. He writes about his profound, aching hope that they are making the right choice. I feel the weight of every single life, he scripts in careful, flowing letters. I can only pray that the gentle hand of Providence is resting on the shoulders of our boys tonight. There is no glory to be found in these midnight hours. The men in the war rooms do not feel like heroes. They feel like mortals, painfully aware of their own limitations, staring into a void they cannot control. They are plagued by the agonizing what-ifs that circle like phantoms in the dark. What if the surf on the African coast is too high, and the landing crafts are dashed against the rocks? What if the local garrisons fight back with terrible ferocity? What if the intelligence was wrong, and they are sending an entire army into a trap? These doubts are never spoken aloud. They are swallowed with bitter coffee and hidden behind impassive faces. But they are there, living in the tight clench of a jaw, the restless tapping of a pencil, the slow, deliberate pacing back and forth across a worn carpet. In another underground room, a group of intelligence officers sits huddled around a radio receiver. They wear large, heavy headphones, their eyes closed in deep concentration. They are listening to the static of the atmosphere, waiting for a coded whisper from the French resistance in Algiers, or a weather report from a lone submarine surfacing in the dark Mediterranean. The silence stretches on for hours. One of the officers, a woman whose fingers are stained with ink from decoding thousands of messages, gently rubs her temples. She reaches into her pocket and pulls out a small, worn photograph of her younger brother. He is somewhere out there, on one of those dark ships. She gently brushes her thumb across his smiling face, a silent, desperate plea into the void. She places the photo carefully on the desk beside the radio, a small, paper guardian angel keeping watch over the dials. As the hours crawl forward, the agonizing wait continues. The plans have been made. The orders have been signed. The immense machinery of the operation has been set into motion, and it is now entirely out of their hands. The generals and the leaders are now merely spectators, waiting in the dark like the rest of the world. The general in London finally steps away from the map. He turns off the small desk lamp, plunging the room into shadows. He walks to the small cot in the corner of his office, unlaces his boots with slow, tired movements, and lies down fully clothed. He stares up at the concrete ceiling, listening to the muffled rumble of a distant train above ground. He tries to quiet his mind, to find a few moments of peace before the sun rises and the terrible waiting begins again. He imagines the ocean. He imagines the soft, rhythmic rolling of the waves. He hopes that the sea is gentle tonight. He hopes that the boys are asleep in their bunks, dreaming of home, of front porches and Sunday dinners and the soft laughter of the people they love. The war rooms fall silent. The typewriters cease their clacking. The radios hum quietly, a steady, soothing white noise in the deep underground. The men who carry the world close their eyes, alone with their private fears and their quiet resilience. They have done all they can. The whispers in the dark are over. Now, they must wait for the dawn, and for the steel leviathans to arrive upon the shore. Sleep comes slowly, if it comes at all, wrapped in the heavy, melancholic hope that the morning will be kind to the boys in the dark. The fog rolls off the harbor like a heavy, gray breath, hiding 1,000 secrets in its damp embrace. The morning is barely a suggestion in the sky. It is that quiet, suspended hour before the sun breaks the horizon, when the world is painted entirely in shades of charcoal and silver. In the deep, cold waters of the ports, the steel leviathans wait. They are massive, quiet giants, their high, gray hulls blending perfectly with the low-hanging clouds. There is no brass band playing on the docks today. There is no confetti raining down, no cheering crowds gathered to wave goodbye. The world must not know they are leaving. And so, the departure is a silent, solemn ballet, performed in the hushed, misty dawn. Listen to the water lapping gently against the steel. It is a slow, rhythmic sound. Slap. Swish. Slap. Swish. It is the heartbeat of the harbor. The air smells of wet wool, damp canvas, diesel, and the sharp, ancient tang of the ocean. Thousands of young men are climbing the narrow wooden gangways. Their footsteps are muffled by the heavy sea bags slung over their tired shoulders. They move quietly, a long, winding river of olive drab and navy blue flowing up from the damp concrete and into the bellies of the great ships. They are young. So very young. Many of them have never seen the ocean before this morning. They grew up in the quiet valleys and the wide, flat plains, surrounded by fields of whispering corn and golden wheat. Now, they are stepping onto floating islands of iron, about to cross an expanse of water so vast it defies their imagination. Deep within the ships, the massive engines begin to wake. It is not a sudden roar, but a low, deep vibration that starts in the soles of their boots and slowly travels up into their chests. It is a comforting rumble, like the purr of a great, sleeping creature. The thick hemp ropes, heavy with morning dew, are gently slipped from the iron cleats on the pier. They splash softly into the dark water, instantly swallowed by the fog. The ships are no longer tethered to the land. They belong to the sea now. Down below, in the cramped, dimly lit compartments, the air is warm. The canvas bunks are stacked high, swaying just a fraction of an inch with the gentle motion of the water. On one of the lower bunks, a soldier sits cross-legged. The only light comes from a small, caged bulb on the steel bulkhead, casting a warm, amber glow over his lap. He is using a hard-bound book as a makeshift desk, pressing a piece of thin, delicate stationery against it. His hands are slightly calloused from years of working a tractor, but he holds the fountain pen with incredible tenderness. He is writing to his father. He does not write about the massive guns on the deck above, or the terrifying expanse of the journey ahead. He writes about the rain on the tin roof of their barn. He asks if the leaves have turned yellow on the old oak tree by the dirt driveway. He asks if his old dog still sleeps by the porch steps, waiting for him to come walking up the lane. In this cramped, floating metal room, surrounded by hundreds of strangers, he is completely transported back to his quiet front porch. He pours his love into the ink, letting the familiar memories wrap around him like a heavy, protective quilt. When he finishes, he carefully folds the paper. It is a fragile piece of his heart, a tiny paper boat of hope that he will send back across the water whenever he reaches the other side. A few compartments away, a group of young nurses sits in a tight circle on the floor. They wear heavy woolen coats over their uniforms to keep out the damp chill of the harbor. One of them is gently humming a tune she learned in her childhood, a soft, wordless melody that floats above the low thrum of the engine. Another is carefully mending a tear in her canvas bag. They do not speak of the hospitals they will build in the dust, or the wounded they will tend. They speak of the smell of hot coffee in the mornings, of the movies they saw last summer, of the sisters and brothers they left behind. Their quiet resilience is a soft, glowing ember in the dim light of the ship. They find strength simply by sitting near one another, their shoulders occasionally brushing as the ship slowly rocks. They are a family forged in the quiet hours of the morning. Up above, on the weather deck, the fog is so thick you can barely see from one end of the ship to the other. It settles on the eyelashes and dampens the collars of the heavy coats. Two young sailors stand by the iron railing, staring out into the gray nothingness. They do not know each other's names. They come from different corners of the world, brought together by the strange, sweeping tide of history. But in this moment, they are brothers. One reaches into his pocket and pulls out a stick of peppermint gum. Without a single word, he breaks it in half and gently offers a piece to the man beside him. The second sailor takes it with a quiet nod of thanks. They chew in silence, leaning against the cold, wet rail. The sweet, sharp taste of the peppermint is a small, brilliant burst of normalcy in an entirely abnormal world. They watch as the shoreline begins to fade. The familiar shapes of buildings and cranes lose their hard edges, becoming soft, blurry shadows in the mist, until finally, they vanish altogether. There is only the sea, and the sky, and the slow, steady hum of the engines carrying them forward. All around them, invisible in the fog, dozens of other ships are doing the exact same thing. It is an armada of ghosts, a city of steel slipping silently through the water. Occasionally, the low, mournful tone of a foghorn echoes across the waves. It is a deeply melancholic sound, a long, hollow note that vibrates in the chest and hangs in the damp air for a long time before fading away. It is the sound of leaving. It is the voice of the vast, unknown ocean calling out to them. Yet, there is also a strange, profound peace to be found out here on the water. The complications of the world left behind are gone. There are no radios ringing with urgent news, no hurried footsteps on the pavement, no frantic headlines. There is only the gentle rocking of the ocean. The sea is a great equalizer. It does not care about borders, or uniforms, or the grand strategies of men. It simply rises and falls, breathing in and breathing out, just as it has done since the dawn of time. It rocks the great ships as if they were nothing more than fallen leaves on a pond. As the morning slowly bleeds into the afternoon, the thick gray fog remains, wrapping the fleet in a protective, secretive embrace. The men begin to settle into the strange new rhythms of shipboard life. They learn to walk with a slight sway, keeping their balance as the deck gently tips beneath their feet. They gather in quiet corners to play slow games of cards, the soft slapping of the paper echoing in the corridors. They share dog-eared paperback books, passing stories back and forth to fill the quiet hours. In a quiet corner near the bow, a young soldier pulls a small, silver pocket watch from his trousers. He presses the little button on the top, and the cover pops open with a satisfying click. Inside the lid is a tiny, black and white photograph of a young woman. She is smiling, the wind catching her hair. He stares at the photograph for a long time, tracing the edge of her face with his thumb. The ticking of the watch is a steady, reassuring sound against the immense backdrop of the ocean. It is a reminder that time is still moving, that this journey, no matter how long or how far, will eventually come to an end. He whispers a quiet promise to the photograph, closes the watch, and tucks it safely away against his chest. The steel leviathans push further out into the deep water. The color of the ocean changes from the murky green of the harbor to a profound, endless black blue. The gentle rocking becomes a slow, mesmerizing swell. For the thousands of souls on board, the fear of what lies ahead is still there, tucked away in the quietest corners of their minds. But it is softened, for now, by the lullaby of the waves. The ocean sounds like a gentle shushing. Shh, rest now. Shh. You are safe here in the dark. The men lie in their narrow bunks, feeling the slow, hypnotic roll of the ship. They listen to the water rushing past the hull, a rushing river of sound that washes away the anxieties of the land. They close their eyes. They drift into sleep, wrapped in warm wool blankets, their folded letters resting in their pockets, their silver watches ticking softly in the dark. They dream of the green hills of home, of the smell of wood smoke in the autumn air, of soft hands holding theirs in the quiet evening. Above them, the steel leviathans glide endlessly through the mist, their prows cutting a silent, graceful path through the dark water. The gathering is complete. The shore is completely gone, swallowed by the gray. There is only the vast, gentle expanse of the sea, holding them softly in its misty embrace, carrying them safely through the fog, toward a horizon they cannot yet see. To float in the center of the ocean at midnight is to know what it means to be truly, beautifully alone. Far from the damp, gray ports of their departure, the great armada has sailed off the edge of the known world, slipping quietly into the vast, uncharted expanse of the Atlantic. Here, far from any shore, the ocean transforms. It is no longer the murky green of the harbor or the bright, sparkling blue of the coastal shallows. Under the heavy cloak of a moonless night, the water becomes a deep, endless void. It is a black sea, profound and unfathomable, stretching out in every direction until it seamlessly meets the dark canvas of the sky. There is no horizon line. There is no up or down in the distance. There is only the gentle, rhythmic swaying of the ship and the absolute, consuming darkness. For the sake of their safety, the ships must travel completely blind. There are no navigational lights on the masts, no bright beacons to guide the way, no portholes glowing with the warm light of the cabins within. The entire fleet, carrying thousands upon thousands of souls, has been ordered to go dark. Heavy blackout curtains are drawn tight across every pane of glass. Below decks, even the strike of a match is strictly forbidden. They are a ghost fleet, a collection of silent, shadowy silhouettes gliding through the pitch-black night, hoping to remain completely invisible to whatever might be lurking beneath the waves. This forced darkness creates a quiet, heavy tension that settles over the ships like a second blanket. It is not the frantic, loud terror of battle. It is a slow, lingering ache. It is the feeling of holding your breath in a quiet room, waiting for a sound that you hope will never come. Up on the weather deck, the cold wind bites through thick layers of wool. A young sailor stands his watch at the bow, his hands gripped tightly around the cold iron rail. He is peering out into the absolute blackness, his eyes straining so hard that the darkness seems to dance and swirl with phantom shapes. He listens to the heavy prow of the ship slicing through the water. It is a relentless, rushing sound, a great hiss of sea foam that glows faintly with pale, green phosphorescence before vanishing back into the deep. He thinks about the sheer depth of the water beneath his boots. Miles and miles of dark, freezing ocean, reaching down to a sandy floor that no human eye has ever seen. He feels incredibly small. He is just a boy from a quiet, dusty town in the desert, a place where the earth is solid and cracked and completely dry. Now, he is suspended over an abyss, riding a hollow shell of steel. The vulnerability is overwhelming. He shivers, though not entirely from the cold. He pulls the high collar of his coat up around his ears, trying to shut out the howling of the wind. Suddenly, a shadow moves beside him. He flinches, his heart fluttering against his ribs, but it is only the older petty officer who shares his watch. The man leans against the rail, his face invisible in the dark. Without a word, he nudges the young sailor's elbow and presses a heavy, metal thermos into his freezing hands. The metal is incredibly warm. The young man unscrews the cup and takes a slow sip. It is black coffee, strong and slightly bitter, but the heat of it blooms in his chest like a small, comforting fire. He hands the thermos back. "Quiet night," the older man whispers, his voice barely audible over the rushing water. "Yes, sir." "Quiet," the young sailor replies. They do not say anything else. They simply stand shoulder to shoulder in the freezing wind, staring into the Black Sea. But in that small, shared silence, the immense loneliness of the ocean is broken. The young sailor feels the solid presence of the man beside him, a steady anchor in a world made entirely of shifting water and dark air. He breathes out, a long, slow exhale of white mist, and turns his eyes back to the horizon. Deep inside the belly of the ship, beneath the heavy steel decks and the freezing wind, the atmosphere is entirely different. It is stiflingly warm, thick with the scent of damp wool, engine oil, and the collective breath of hundreds of men packed tightly together. Here, the darkness is replaced by the dim, eerie glow of red battle lights. The scarlet illumination washes over the long rows of canvas bunks, turning the cramped compartment into a surreal, shadowy cavern. The men are trying to sleep, but sleep is a fragile, elusive thing on the Black Sea. The ship is constantly moving, rising high on the slow, rolling swells and then dropping down into the deep troughs with a heavy, shuddering groan. Every piece of metal creaks and complains. The massive engines thrum with a relentless, vibrating energy that rattles the teeth and hums deep in the marrow of their bones. In a lower bunk, barely a few inches from the steel floor, a medic lies awake on his back. His hands are folded across his chest, his eyes tracing the labyrinth of pipes and wires running along the ceiling just above his face. He is listening to the sounds of the men around him. He hears the shifting of canvas, the soft, muffled coughs, the occasional quiet mutterings of a man dreaming of home. He knows that every single person in this room is feeling the exact same thing. They are all holding their breath. To distract himself from the heavy, groaning sounds of the hull, the medic reaches under his thin pillow. His fingers brush against a small, folded square of paper. It is a letter from his wife, arriving just days before he boarded the ship. He does not need to open it in the dim red light. He has read it so many times that the words are permanently etched into his memory. He knows the exact slant of her handwriting, the way she loops her letters, the soft, slightly smudged ink where she rested her hand on the page. He closes his eyes and lets the words wash over him. She wrote about the small garden behind their house. She told him that the tomatoes were finally coming in, small and green, and that she had spent the afternoon pulling weeds from the soft, dark soil. It is such an ordinary, beautifully mundane detail. But here, suspended in the middle of a terrifying ocean, that small memory is a lifeline. He imagines the smell of the damp earth, the warmth of the afternoon sun on his back, the gentle sound of a screen door swinging shut. He clings to that image, wrapping it around his anxious heart. It is a quiet, private rebellion against the vast, indifferent sea. Love, he realizes in the dark, is the only thing heavy enough to anchor a man when the whole world is drifting. Across the narrow aisle, a young infantryman shifts restlessly in his sleep. His blanket slips off his shoulder, pooling on the metal deck below. The medic watches for a moment, then quietly rolls onto his side. He reaches out a careful hand, grabs the edge of the rough wool blanket, and gently pulls it back over the sleeping boy's shoulders, tucking it softly beneath his chin. The boy sighs, a quiet, peaceful sound, and settles deeper into his bunk. It is a microscopic gesture of kindness, unseen by anyone else in the world, but it fills the dim, red room with a profound sense of grace. They are strangers, brought together by the chaotic tide of history, but tonight, they are all keepers of one another. As the hours stretch on, the tension of the crossing becomes a living, breathing thing. It is in the heavy footsteps of the officers pacing the bridge, their eyes fixed on the empty radar screens. It is in the tense, aching shoulders of the men sitting in the damp holds, waiting for a morning that feels impossibly far away. It is a collective, silent endurance. They are enduring the terrifying vastness of the world. They are enduring their own smallness. Yet, if you listen closely to the sound of the ship cutting through the water, you might hear something else beneath the fear. You might hear the rhythm of a cradle. The ocean is vast and dangerous, yes, but tonight, it is also holding them. The slow, sweeping rise and fall of the waves is like the deep, steady breathing of a sleeping giant. Up, into the dark, weightless air. Down, into the heavy, comforting embrace of the water. The men begin to surrender to this rhythm. The exhausted minds finally give way to the heavy pull of the sea. The pacing on the bridge slows. The anxious tossing in the bunks quiets down into steady, synchronized breathing. Even the young lookout on the bow, his face numbed by the cold wind, finds his grip on the railing relaxing just a fraction. He watches the pale, glowing foam wash away from the ship, mesmerizing and beautiful, like a river of stars flowing backward into the night. They are floating on a black sea, completely alone in the dark, surrounded by an abyss they cannot comprehend. But they are still breathing. The steel walls hold strong. The engines continue their faithful, vibrating purr. The letters in their pockets remain safe and dry. There is a quiet, resilient beauty in this suspended moment. It is the beauty of millions of heartbeats ticking away in the darkness, refusing to give in to the void. It is the profound courage of simply sitting still, of holding the line in the quiet hours of the night. So let the wind howl across the empty deck. Let the water hiss and churn against the heavy iron plates. Let the darkness stretch out forever. Inside the steel leviathans, the young men sleep. They hold their breath, together, as the dark, indifferent ocean carries them gently through the night. Rest now, in the quiet hum of the ship. Rest your weary eyes. The dark water is deep, and the night is long, but the morning is always waiting, just beyond the edge of the Black Sea. To step off the edge of a steel mountain into the pitch-black sea is to step entirely into faith. Listen to the silence that falls when the great engines finally stop. For days, the deep, vibrating hum of the ships has been a constant companion, a steady, rattling heartbeat that hummed in the floorboards and settled deep within the bones of the men sleeping below. But now, in the deepest, coldest hour of the night, that vibration slowly winds down. The massive propellers cease their churning. The steel leviathans drift to a quiet, heavy halt just off the coast of Morocco. The sudden absence of the engine's roar is profound. It leaves a ringing in the ears, a heavy, breathless quiet that fills the dark compartments. This is the moment the waiting ends. But there are no bugles sounding in the dark. There are no loud commands echoing down the narrow iron hallways. There is only the soft, muffled shifting of thousands of young men waking up in the shadows. They rise from their canvas bunks with slow, heavy movements. They dress in the dark, their fingers clumsy and stiff from the damp cold, tracing the familiar shapes of buckles and canvas straps entirely by touch. Every metallic clink of a canteen, every snap of a webbing clasp, is immediately hushed by a frantic hand. Silence is their only armor tonight. They move like sleepwalkers, forming long, quiet lines that snake up the narrow stairwells toward the weather deck. The air grows colder with every step upward. When they finally emerge beneath the open sky, the night air hits them like a damp, freezing wall. The wind carries the rich, heavy scent of salt, kelp, and something completely new, the faint, dusty fragrance of the African continent, hiding just out of sight in the blackness. The men stand shoulder to shoulder along the iron railing. They peer out over the edge, but there is nothing to see. The ocean below is an abyss. The sky above is entirely devoid of stars, blanketed by thick, low clouds. They are suspended in a world of absolute shadow. Over the side of the great ships, heavy cargo nets made of thick, rough hemp have been unrolled. They drape down the high steel walls, disappearing into the churning black water below. Down there, somewhere in the dark, the small, flat-bottomed landing crafts are waiting. They are bobbing violently on the ocean swells, little wooden and metal boxes knocking against the hull of the mother ship. A quiet whisper is passed down the line. It is time to go. To climb down a swaying net in the pitch black, burdened by the immense weight of wet canvas and heavy boots, is a terrifying, clumsy thing. The young men swing their legs over the railing, their hearts hammering against their ribs like trapped birds. The wind tears at their coats. The rope is rough and wet, biting into the palms of their hands. They descend one slow, agonizing step at a time. The net sways outward with the roll of the ship, suspending them over the empty air, and then slams back against the steel hull with a heavy, jarring thud. In the middle of the descent, a young boy loses his footing. His wet boot slips from the thick rope. For a heart-stopping second, he hangs by one arm, his fingers screaming against the friction, the heavy weight of his gear threatening to pull him down into the black water. He squeezes his eyes shut, a silent, desperate gasp caught in his throat. But before he can fall, a hand reaches out from the darkness above. It is a rough, calloused hand, belonging to a boy whose name he does not even know. The hand grabs the thick canvas webbing of his shoulder strap in a grip of absolute iron. "I have you," a voice whispers from the shadows above. It is a breath of sound, instantly carried away by the wind, but it is the most beautiful thing the slipping boy has ever heard. He finds his footing again. He looks up into the dark, unable to see the face of his savior, and gives a small, trembling nod. In this terrifying descent, they are not soldiers in a grand army. They are simply human beings, clinging to a rope in the dark, completely dependent on the mercy and strength of the stranger beside them. One by one, they drop into the small landing crafts. The transition is jarring. They have left the sturdy, unshakable fortress of the great ship and are now standing in a fragile, hollow shell that pitches and rolls with every breath of the sea. The boats are crowded, the men packed in so tightly that their knees and shoulders are pressed together. They sit on low wooden benches, completely surrounded by the tall, cold steel walls of the craft. The air in the boat smells sharply of diesel fumes and freezing ocean spray. The water crashes against the flat bow, sending showers of freezing rain over the men. It soaks through their heavy wool coats, running down their necks in icy rivers. They shiver, uncontrollably, their teeth chattering in the dark. It is not just the cold that shakes them. It is the adrenaline. It is the profound, overwhelming vulnerability of being entirely exposed to the elements and the unknown. In the back of one of the boats, a young medic sits with his head bowed. The freezing spray collects on the rim of his heavy helmet and drips slowly onto his knees. He reaches into his front pocket and pulls out a small, smooth wooden carving. It is a tiny figure of a bird, whittled by his grandfather from a piece of soft pine back home. He rubs his thumb over the smooth wood, feeling the familiar grooves and curves. It is a piece of home, a tangible piece of safety. He holds it tight inside his closed fist, letting the warmth of his own hand seep into the wood. He closes his eyes and begins to whisper a prayer. He does not pray for medals or victory. He prays simply for the sun to rise. He prays that he will remember the smell of his mother's kitchen, the sound of the rain on his childhood roof, the feeling of walking down a dirt road with nothing to carry but his own thoughts. Around him, a chorus of silent prayers rises into the night air. The boat is filled with the soft, rapid murmur of moving lips. Some speak to a distant god. Some speak to the sweethearts whose photographs are carefully wrapped in wax paper and tucked inside their breast pockets. Some simply count the heavy thuds of the waves against the hull, using the numbers as a soothing anchor for their racing minds. 1, 2, 3. Breathe in. 4, 5, 6. Breathe out. The boat's engine suddenly rumbles to a deeper, throaty growl. The ropes are cast off. The small craft pulls away from the towering shadow of the mother ship, turning its flat nose toward the invisible shore. Now, they are truly alone. They are silhouettes in the surf, dark shapes huddled together against the cold, floating in the great void between the ocean and the earth. The sea swells beneath them, lifting the small boat high into the air, making their stomachs drop, before sliding them down into the deep, black troughs. The white foam glows faintly on the crests of the waves, the only light in the entire world. A young boy sitting near the front of the craft begins to cry. It is a quiet, silent weeping, his shoulders shaking with the effort of holding it in. The fear has simply grown too large for his chest. The man sitting next to him, a quiet farmer from the plains who has not spoken a word since they left port, slowly uncrosses his arms. He reaches out and rests his heavy, warm hand over the boy's trembling hands. He does not offer hollow reassurances. He does not tell him to be brave. He simply presses his hand down, a steady, physical presence in the dark. "I am here," the pressure of his hand says. "You are not alone in this boat. We will cross this dark water together." Slowly, the boy's shaking begins to ease. He leans his shoulder just a fraction of an inch against the older man's arm, drawing warmth from his quiet resilience. Ahead of them, out in the darkness, a new sound begins to emerge beneath the rumble of the engine. It is a low, rhythmic booming. It is the sound of the Atlantic Ocean crashing against the shores of North Africa. Under normal circumstances, it is a deeply soothing sound, the ancient lullaby of the tide meeting the sand. But tonight, it is the sound of their destination. It is the boundary line between the waiting and the reality. The men fall entirely silent. Even the whispered prayers fade away. They simply sit, listening to the surf grow louder and closer. The spray hits their faces, tasting of salt and sorrow and quiet hope. They feel the fragile beat of their own hearts, drumming a steady, fast rhythm against their ribs. It is the beautiful, fragile sound of life, stubbornly persisting in the dark. The boat rocks gently. Up and down. Forward and forward. The ocean is carrying them now. The water rushes past the steel sides, a gentle, hissing whisper. "Shh, shh. We are almost there." They close their eyes and let the rocking of the sea hold them for just a few moments more. They are brothers now, bound by the cold water and the dark sky, held together by the quiet grace of a shared blanket and a warm hand in the night. The surf calls out to them, a heavy, rhythmic heartbeat in the distance. They take a deep, slow breath of the cold air, filling their lungs with the smell of the approaching shore. They hold it in. And they wait, suspended in the gentle dark, for the inevitable scrape of the sand beneath their feet. The grating sound of steel kissing the sand is the loudest whisper in the world. For hours, the young men have been creatures of the water, suspended in a dark, swaying void where the only reality was the cold spray of the sea and the frantic beating of their own hearts. They have lived in the deep, breathless hollow between the ocean and the sky, holding tightly to their heavy woolen coats and the silent prayers echoing in their minds. But now, that dark journey is broken by a sudden, shuddering halt. The flat bottom of the landing craft scrapes against the hidden shallows of the African coast. It is a harsh, vibrating grind that travels up through the soles of their boots, rattling their frozen bones. And then, the chaotic rocking simply stops. The heavy iron ramp at the front of the boat falls forward with a dull, wet splash. Suddenly, the absolute blackness of the night is broken. The world opens up before them, not with a roar, but with a strange, surreal quiet. The wind howling across the open ocean has been broken by the land, leaving only the soft, rhythmic churning of the surf. The men hesitate for just a fraction of a second. They are standing on the threshold of an entirely new world, staring out into a thick, gray twilight. With a slow, collective breath, they step forward off the ramp and plunge into the water. The ocean is shockingly cold. It bites at their thighs and their waists, a freezing, heavy embrace that instantly soaks through their thick trousers. The water pulls at them, heavy with sand and sea foam, trying to drag them back into the deep. But they press forward, their boots finding the uneven, shifting floor of the sea. They move with an agonizing slowness, leaning their weight against the water, their heavy canvas bags and cold rifles held high above their heads like fragile offerings. In the pale, shifting gloom, a young boy loses his balance. A hidden dip in the sand drops the water straight up to his chest, and the sudden weight of his soaked gear pulls him under the churning surf. The dark water closes over his head. Panic, hot and sharp, flares in his chest. But before he can even struggle, two strong hands plunge into the icy water and grab the thick fabric of his suspenders. He is hauled upward, bursting through the surface with a loud, desperate gasp. He wipes the stinging salt water from his eyes and looks up. The man holding him is a stranger from another boat, his face pale and drawn, his jaw trembling from the cold. The stranger does not say a word. He simply gives the boy's shoulder a firm, steady squeeze, a silent anchor in the chaotic tide. Together, leaning against one another, they turn their faces toward the shore and keep walking. As they drag themselves out of the heavy surf and onto the solid earth, the eastern horizon begins to change. The absolute black of the night softens, slowly dissolving into a deep, bruised purple. It is the unwelcome dawn. They had prayed for the dark to hide them, to wrap them in its protective, invisible blanket. But the sun cares nothing for the affairs of men. It rises with ancient, unstoppable grace, casting its first, tentative light across the foreign sand. The young men collapse onto the beach, their chests heaving, their lungs burning from the cold air and the immense effort of the crossing. They are completely exhausted, their bodies aching and heavy with wet wool. They sit in the wet sand, their helmets pushed back, staring out at the world that is slowly revealing itself around them. It is a landscape of breathtaking, heartbreaking beauty. As the purple sky melts into a soft, glowing peach, the coast of Morocco begins to catch the light. The long, sweeping dunes of sand are not the gray, muddy dirt of their training camps, but a rich, vibrant gold. The sand is incredibly fine, soft as powdered sugar beneath their wet, heavy boots. Just beyond the beach, tall, slender palm trees sway gently in the morning breeze, their dark green fronds rustling with a sound that is entirely alien to the boys from the pine forests and the snowy plains. A soldier from a quiet, landlocked farming town sits near the edge of the water. He slowly pulls off his soaked leather gloves, wringing the ocean water onto the ground. He reaches down and scoops up a handful of the golden sand. He rubs it between his thumb and forefinger, feeling the tiny, ancient grains of quartz and crushed shells. It is just earth. It is so completely different from the dark, rich soil of his father's cornfields, and yet, it is the exact same thing. It is ground. It is the earth that holds the world together. He looks at the sand in his palm, and a profound, quiet sorrow washes over him. He realizes that this beautiful, quiet place was sleeping before they arrived. This beach, with its gentle waves and swaying palms, was meant for fishermen casting their nets in the early light, for children running barefoot in the surf, for the simple, peaceful rhythms of an ordinary life. And now, it is. Covered in steel and wet canvas and the heavy, frightened breaths of thousands of strangers. He feels the tragic weight of their intrusion. They have brought the heavy, complicated sorrows of the world to this serene, ancient shore. He gently opens his hand, letting the golden sand spill through his fingers and blow away in the morning wind. It is a quiet apology, spoken entirely in silence. Down the beach, the light continues to grow, painting the white-capped waves in shades of rose and lavender. The men begin to slowly stand up, their muscles stiff and shivering. They look down the coastline, and there, rising from the morning mist like a dream, are the cities. Casablanca and Oran. The names alone sound like poetry, whispering of spice markets and winding alleyways and centuries of history. In the distance, the whitewashed walls of the buildings begin to glow with a brilliant, pearlescent light. The tall, slender minarets point toward the fading stars, silent witnesses to the strange armada that has appeared on their doorstep. The windows of the coastal homes catch the rising sun, flashing like tiny diamonds against the green hillsides. The soldiers stare at the cities, completely mesmerized. They feel incredibly small, just tiny specks of olive drab against a vast, colorful canvas. They wonder who is waking up inside those white houses. They think of the mothers pouring hot tea, the fathers looking out their windows at the suddenly crowded horizon, the children rubbing the sleep from their eyes. The fear they feel for themselves is suddenly matched by a deep, aching empathy for the people whose home they are now standing on. They do not want to break the quiet of this beautiful morning. They wish, more than anything, that they could simply turn around, walk back into the ocean, and leave this beautiful place in peace. But history is a heavy tide, and it only moves forward. The men begin to gather their scattered belongings. A young corporal kneels in the damp sand to pick up a wet piece of paper that slipped from his pocket during the chaos of the surf. It is a photograph of his sweetheart, sitting on the hood of a car back home. The edges are curled, and the salt water has slightly blurred the ink on the back, but her face is still perfectly clear. Her smile is a brilliant, joyful thing, completely untouched by the damp, cold reality of the beach. He wipes the wet sand from the photograph with his thumb, pressing it carefully between the pages of a small, soaked notebook. He places it deep inside his jacket, right against his chest, keeping her safe from the wind. He draws a long, slow breath, pulling the warmth of her memory into his lungs, and stands up to join his friends. There is a quiet resilience settling over the beach. It is not the bold, shouting courage of a storybook. It is the quiet, stubborn endurance of ordinary people who find themselves in an extraordinary place. They look at one another, really look, their eyes meeting in the pale morning light. They see the salt dried on their eyelashes. They see the trembling of their hands. They see the shared, unspoken realization that they have crossed the dark water, they have faced the terrible unknown of the night, and they are still here. They are still breathing. An older sergeant, his face lined with quiet exhaustion, walks slowly down the line of men. He does not shout orders. He does not demand attention. He simply stops in front of a young, shivering private, reaches out, and gently adjusts the heavy strap of the boy's pack, moving it away from a raw, chafed spot on his neck. "Sun's coming up," the sergeant whispers, his voice low and incredibly gentle. The young private nods, looking toward the horizon. "Yes, sir. It is. It'll warm us up soon," the sergeant says. He gives the boy a small, comforting pat on the shoulder and continues his slow walk down the beach. And slowly, surely, the sun does rise. It breaks fully over the horizon, a brilliant, blinding sphere of pale gold. The light spills across the ocean, turning the dark water into a dazzling mirror. The warmth of the sun finally touches their backs. It is a profound, physical relief. The shivering begins to slow. The heavy, wet wool of their uniforms begins to steam in the cool morning air. They stand together on the edge of the continent, a long line of silhouettes caught in the quiet space between the ocean and the dunes. The unwelcome dawn has arrived, washing away the shadows of the night. It has revealed the strange, breathtaking beauty of North Africa, a land of white cities, golden sand, and ancient, quiet dignity. And it has revealed the men to themselves, tired, frightened, yet deeply, beautifully human. They listen to the sound of the seagulls waking up and crying out over the surf. They listen to the wind rustling the palm fronds. They take a moment to simply exist in the morning light, gathering their scattered hearts, finding strength in the small, quiet kindnesses of the men standing beside them. The waiting is over. The dark sea is behind them. They take a deep breath of the warm, sunlit air, turn their faces away from the ocean, and begin to walk slowly, gently, into the dawn. To draw a weapon against a friend is to fight a quiet, terrible war within your own heart. As the morning sun climbs higher into the pale North African sky, the golden light spills across the rolling hills and ancient olive groves. The air here is warm, carrying the sweet, earthy scent of wild thyme, crushed eucalyptus, and the dry, ancient dust of the continent. It is a landscape that seems to beg for quiet afternoons, for the gentle grazing of sheep, and for the slow, peaceful passing of time. But beneath the silver leaves of the olive trees, a profound and tragic confusion is unfolding. The young men who waded through the freezing surf and walked onto these foreign shores did not come with hatred in their hearts. They came believing they were arriving as liberators, extending a hand across the ocean to the people of France, an old and cherished friend. But the world they have stepped into is tangled in a web of complex loyalties, broken treaties, and the bitter shadows of a distant occupation. The soldiers who stand waiting for them in the coastal batteries and along the dusty roads wear the uniforms of the French military. They are men who, just 2 decades ago, bled shoulder to shoulder with the fathers of these very American boys. Now, through the cruel and confusing dictates of a fractured world, they find themselves looking at one another through the iron sights of their rifles. In a shallow trench carved into the side of a sun-baked hill, a young American infantryman lies perfectly still. His uniform is still damp from the ocean crossing, stiff with dried salt and sand. He is staring through the tall, dry grass toward a small stone farmhouse in the distance. He can see the blue coats of the French defenders moving near the windows. His finger rests gently against the cold metal of his trigger, but it feels as heavy as a stone. He does not want to press it. He grew up in a small, wooden house where a framed photograph of his father sat proudly on the mantelpiece. In that photograph, his father was a young man, standing arm in arm with a French soldier in the muddy fields of the Great War, their faces bright with a shared, unbreakable brotherhood. He grew up listening to stories of French courage, of shared loaves of bread in the rain, of a bond forged in the deepest fires of humanity. He had packed a small, dog-eared French phrasebook in his canvas bag, hoping to use it to buy a cup of coffee or to offer a warm greeting. He never imagined he would need to learn the words for surrender. He presses his cheek against the wooden stock of his rifle and closes his eyes for a long, slow moment. He whispers a quiet, desperate prayer into the dry earth. Please, he thinks, the words echoing in the silence of his own mind. Please, just walk away. Let me lower this gun. Do not make me break my father's heart. A few hundred yards away, inside the thick, cool walls of the stone farmhouse, a French officer stands near a narrow window. The sunlight catches the silver buttons on his tunic, a tunic he has worn with profound pride for many years. He looks out across the fields, watching the olive-drab figures moving slowly through the brush. He can see the white stars painted on the sides of their distant vehicles. He recognizes the emblem of the Americans. A terrible, aching sorrow settles deep in his chest. His own country across the sea is broken, caught in the grip of an occupying force. For months, he has looked out over the Mediterranean, hoping to see the sails of allies coming to help set his homeland free. And now, here they are. The Americans have arrived. But his orders, passed down through a convoluted chain of command he barely recognizes anymore, demand that he hold this road. He is a soldier. He has sworn an oath to obey. But as he looks at the young men creeping through the grass, he feels the agonizing weight of that oath crushing his spirit. He slowly reaches into his pocket and pulls out a small, silver lighter. He turns it over in his hand, feeling the smooth metal. It was a gift from an American pilot he met in Paris, years before the world fell apart. A token of friendship. He holds it tightly, closing his eyes against the stinging tears that threaten to fall. He knows that the men out there are not his enemies. They are boys from far away, scared and tired, just like the men standing in this very room. He turns to his own soldiers, young men with fear in their eyes, waiting for his command. He cannot bring himself to shout the order to fire. The silence in the farmhouse stretches on, heavy with regret, thicker than the stone walls that surround them. Eventually, the unbearable tension snaps. A single, sharp crack of a rifle echoes across the valley. No one knows who fired it, or if it was simply the accidental slip of a trembling finger. But the sound tears through the peaceful morning like a piece of dark fabric. The skirmish that follows is not a roaring, triumphant battle. It is a slow, hesitant, and profoundly reluctant exchange. The firing is sporadic, filled with long, agonizing pauses. The American soldiers press their faces into the dirt, listening to the bullets snap through the olive branches above, stripping the silver leaves from the trees. They do not want to shoot back. When they do return fire, they aim high, sending their bullets harmlessly into the blue sky, hoping the noise alone will be enough to end the tragic misunderstanding. Down in the grove, a young American drops his rifle entirely. He cups his hands around his mouth and shouts across the sunlit clearing. "We are Americans," his voice cracks, desperate and pleading. "We are your friends. Ne tirez pas. Do not shoot." His words float across the distance, hanging in the warm, dusty air. For a terrible moment, there is no answer. Only the gentle rustling of the wind through the dry grass. Then, from behind a low stone wall, a voice calls back in heavily accented English. "We do not want this. Forgive us. We do not want this." It is the most heartbreaking exchange of the entire war. Men hiding in the shadows, begging one another for permission to lay down their arms. They are trapped in a terrible play, forced to act out roles they desperately wish to abandon. They are brothers, separated by a tragic twist of history, crying out to each other across a divide of 50 yards and 1,000 broken promises. Slowly, almost miraculously, the firing begins to fade. It does not end with a white flag or a formal surrender. It simply fizzles out, as the heavy weight of shared sorrow overwhelms the dictates of duty. The silence that returns to the valley is not the tense, waiting silence of the morning. It is the exhausted, mournful silence of a funeral. Men slowly begin to rise from the tall grass and step out from behind the stone walls. They leave their weapons on the ground, useless pieces of iron and wood. They walk toward one another in the center of the dusty road, their hands empty, their shoulders slumped with an immense, unutterable relief. The young American boy who had prayed in the trench walks up to a French soldier standing near the farmhouse. They are roughly the same age. The French boy's uniform is covered in white dust from the plaster walls. His hands are shaking. The American stops a few feet away. He does not know what to say. The phrasebook in his pocket suddenly feels entirely useless. There are no words in any language for the quiet tragedy they have just survived. Instead of speaking, the American reaches to his belt. He unhooks his metal canteen, unscrews the small black cap, and gently holds it out. The French soldier looks at the canteen, then up at the American's face. He sees the exact same fear, the exact same exhaustion, and the exact same profound regret that is sitting in his own heart. He reaches out with a trembling hand and takes the canteen. He takes a long, slow drink of the warm water, then wipes his mouth with the back of his sleeve. He hands it back, and as their fingers brush against the cool metal, he offers a small, broken smile. "Merci," he whispers. "Thank you, brother." Further down the road, an American medic kneels in the dirt beside a wounded French artilleryman. The medic's hands are stained with dust and iodine as he carefully wraps a clean white bandage around the man's arm. He works with an incredible, tender gentleness, humming a soft, nameless tune to soothe the wounded man. The French soldier watches the medic's face, his eyes wide with a mixture of pain and profound gratitude. With his good hand, he reaches up and weakly grasps the fabric of the medic's sleeve, holding onto him as if he were an anchor in a churning sea. All across the sunlit landscape, these small, quiet scenes of humanity begin to unfold. Enemies who were never truly enemies share cigarettes under the shade of the olive trees. They sit side by side on the low stone walls, looking at dog-eared photographs of sweethearts and children, pointing and nodding, understanding the universal language of love and longing. They do not talk about the war, or the generals, or the politics that brought them to this dusty road. They talk about the weather. They talk about the aching beauty of the sky. They simply sit together, breathing in the sweet scent of the eucalyptus, finding comfort in the quiet presence of one another. As the afternoon shadows begin to lengthen, stretching long and purple across the hills, the strange, tragic day draws to a close. The skirmish is over. The broken ties have been painfully, beautifully mended in the quiet spaces between the gunfire. The American soldiers prepare to move further inland, packing their canvas bags and shouldering their heavy packs. As they walk past the French soldiers, there are no harsh words. There are no stares of hatred. There are only quiet nods, soft pats on the shoulder, and whispered wishes of safety in the dark. The young American looks back one last time at the stone farmhouse. He sees the French officer standing in the doorway, the silver lighter glinting softly in his hand. The officer raises his hand in a slow, solemn salute, not to a conquering army, but to the shared humanity that survived the day. The American returns the salute, his heart completely full, the heavy stone of regret finally lifting from his chest. They walk away beneath the ancient trees, leaving the olive grove to the quiet rustling of the wind. They are brothers torn apart by a world gone mad, but for a few brief, beautiful hours in the warm North African sun, they found their way back to one another. They leave behind the echoes of sorrow, stepping forward into the evening, carrying the gentle, enduring hope that one day, all the rifles will be laid down in the dust, and the entire world can finally share a quiet drink of water in the shade. When the world above is turning upside down, the entire universe shrinks to the quiet space between four stone walls. The ancient city of Algiers is a beautiful, sprawling labyrinth. It is a cascade of white stone and sun-bleached terraces tumbling gently down the steep hills toward the deep, shimmering blue of the Mediterranean Sea. In times of peace, these narrow, winding alleys are rivers of life. They are filled with the rich, intoxicating scent of roasting coffee, sweet mint, and warm bread baking in communal ovens. They echo with the beautiful, chaotic music of a vibrant city, the calls of merchants, the laughter of children chasing stray cats over the cobblestones, the rhythmic, soothing clatter of daily existence. But today, the Casbah is holding its breath. The heavy wooden doors, carved with centuries of history, are pulled shut and bolted tight. The wooden shutters, usually thrown wide open to catch the sea breeze, are latched against the unknown. The grand sweep of history has arrived on their doorstep, washing over the city like a sudden, unseasonable tide. In the grand war rooms across the ocean, men lean over maps and move painted pieces across the paper representation of this city. They speak of strategic ports and supply lines. But down here, at the street level, war is not a map. War is an echo. War is the terrifying sound of heavy boots walking over the roof of your world. Beneath a narrow house in the heart of the old city, a family sits in the absolute dark. They have retreated down the narrow, worn stone steps into the cellar, a place usually reserved for escaping the fierce heat of the midsummer sun, or for storing jars of preserved lemons, cured olives, and heavy, folded wool rugs. Now, it is their sanctuary. The air down here is incredibly cool, smelling deeply of damp earth and ancient stone. The only light comes from a single, short candle resting on a wooden crate. The flame flickers, casting long, soft, dancing shadows against the curved ceiling. A father sits on a low stool, his back pressed firmly against the heavy wooden door that leads to the street above. His name is of no consequence to the history books, but in this small room, he is the guardian of the entire world. His hands, rough from years of working at the docks, rest on his knees. He is staring at the faint sliver of daylight slipping through a tiny, iron-grated ventilation window near the ceiling. He feels a profound, aching helplessness. He is a strong man, a proud man, but how does a father protect his family from the shifting plates of the earth? He cannot fight an army. He cannot turn back the tide. He can only sit in the dark, offering the quiet strength of his presence, and pray that the storm passes over their roof without striking. Across the small, earthen room, his wife sits on a pile of woven blankets. She has drawn her knees up, creating a safe, warm harbor in her lap for their 2 young children. Her daughter, a little girl with dark, frightened eyes, has buried her face in the soft fabric of her mother's dress. Her son, just a few years older, sits rigidly beside them, trying bravely to mimic the stoic posture of his father. The mother slowly, methodically strokes her daughter's hair. It is a gentle, rhythmic motion. Smooth and hold. Smooth and hold. She is humming a lullaby, a melody so soft and so quiet it is barely a breath. It is a song about a little boat sailing on a calm sea, looking for the silver moon. She hums not just to soothe the children, but to build a fragile, invisible wall of sound between her family and the terrifying noises bleeding down from the street above. In the Casbah, sound travels in strange, deceptive ways. The high stone walls of the alleys act like canyons, bouncing and amplifying every noise. First, there is the distant, low rumble of heavy engines, a vibration that they feel in their teeth before they hear it with their ears. Then comes the sound of the soldiers. It is an entirely alien cadence. It is not the familiar, shuffling steps of neighbors in leather sandals. It is the heavy, rhythmic, metallic clatter of an invading force. Clack. 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 Thick rubber and heavy canvas boots striking the ancient, uneven cobblestones. To the family huddled in the cellar, every footstep sounds impossibly loud, as if the boots are stepping directly onto their own fragile hearts. They hear the friction of thick wool uniforms brushing against the stucco walls. They hear the clinking of heavy metal canteens and the rattle of equipment. And they hear the voices. Harsh, tired, foreign words, spoken in short, clipped tones. The language of the Americans and the British, mixing with the sudden, sharp replies of the local French garrisons. It is a confusing, terrifying symphony of the unknown. The little boy flinches as a particularly loud shout echoes down the alleyway. He looks toward the iron grate, his eyes wide with a quiet panic. His mother leans forward, her face bathed in the warm, amber glow of the candle. She gently touches his cheek. "Look at me, my love," she whispers, her voice remarkably steady. "Look at the light." The boy tears his eyes away from the shadowed window and looks at his mother. "They are just men walking by," she murmurs, weaving a comforting fiction to shield his young mind. It is a parade. A very loud, very tired parade. They are far from their homes, and they are lost in our winding streets. We will just stay quietly here, like little mice in the grain, until they find their way out. She smiles at him, a small, brave curving of her lips that costs her an immense amount of energy. But it works. The boy's shoulders drop just a fraction of an inch. He leans his head against his mother's arm, anchoring himself to her steady heartbeat. The father watches this exchange from his place by the door. His heart swells with a devastating love for his wife. Her quiet resilience is the most heroic thing he has ever seen. She is not carrying a rifle, she is not drawing a line on a map, but she is fighting a desperate, beautiful battle to keep the souls of their children intact. Suddenly, the footsteps above grow louder. They are no longer echoing from the next street over, they are right outside the heavy wooden door. The family freezes. The mother's humming stops. The father holds his breath, every muscle in his body pulling tight as a wire. Through the small iron grate at the top of the wall, they hear the sound of heavy gear being dropped onto the cobblestones with an exhausted thud. Someone sits down on the stone stoop, right on the other side of their door. The silence in the cellar is absolute. They are terrified to move, terrified that the scrape of a shoe or a sudden cough will draw the attention of the soldiers outside. They are completely at the mercy of the strangers leaning against their home. Through the grate, the father can just barely see the silhouette of a soldier. The man is slouched forward, his head resting in his hands. He hears the soldier let out a long, ragged sigh, a sound that transcends all language and borders. It is the universal sound of a human being who has simply been pushed to the very edge of his endurance. Then comes the striking of a match. A sudden flare of yellow light illuminates the small square of the grate. The father sees a face. It is not the face of a hardened, terrifying conqueror. It is the face of a boy, perhaps barely 18 years old. His cheeks are smudged with dirt and engine grease. His eyes are hollow, red-rimmed, and filled with a profound, homesick sorrow. The boy takes a slow drag from a cigarette, the glowing tip illuminating the soft, frightened curve of his jaw. The sweet, sharp smell of tobacco drifts down through the iron bars, filling the damp cellar. For a long moment, the father and the soldier exist mere inches apart, separated by a few wooden planks and an ocean of circumstance. The father's fear begins to slowly recede, replaced by a strange, quiet empathy. He remembers what his wife had just whispered to their son. They are far from their homes, and they are lost. Looking at the boy on the stoop, the father realizes the absolute truth of those words. The monster at the door is just a tired, frightened child, sitting in an alley thousands of miles from his mother, wishing for nothing more than a few minutes of rest and the familiar taste of tobacco. The grand sweep of the war vanishes, leaving only two exhausted humans sharing a quiet moment in the shadows. Up on the stoop, the young soldier finishes his cigarette. He drops it onto the cobblestones and crushes it beneath the heel of his boot. He reaches into the deep pocket of his canvas jacket and pulls out something small and metallic. He shifts his weight, turning slightly toward the iron grate. For a second, the soldier pauses. Perhaps he hears the soft rustle of clothing below. Perhaps he simply senses the presence of life on the other side of the stone. He kneels down by the grate. The father tenses, his hand gripping the edge of his stool. The soldier slowly, gently, pushes the small metallic object through the iron bars. It falls with a soft clink onto the dusty floor of the cellar, right at the father's feet. Above them, a voice calls out in English. The soldier groans softly, a tired, heavy sound. He picks up his gear, the canvas scraping against the door, and his heavy footsteps begin to walk away. Clack. 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 Moving further down the alley, fading slowly into the distance, until they are swallowed completely by the labyrinth of the Casbah. The silence that returns to the street is entirely different now. It is no longer a heavy, threatening silence. It is the silence of a storm that has finally broken and passed. The father breathes out, a long, shuddering exhale. He reaches down into the dust and picks up the object the soldier had dropped. He holds it up to the flickering light of the candle. It is a small, sealed tin of sweet peaches from a military ration kit. He looks at it for a long time. It is a tiny, incredibly profound gesture. It was not an act of charity, nor an act of war. It was an apology. It was a silent, whispered offering from one human being to another in the dark. I know I do not belong here, the little tin says. I am sorry for the fear I have brought to your door. May this bring you a moment of sweetness. The father turns and walks slowly across the cellar. He kneels down beside his wife and his children. He holds the small tin out to them. The little boy's eyes go wide. The mother looks from the tin to her husband's face, reading the profound relief and the quiet grace in his eyes. She reaches out and touches his hand, a gentle squeeze that speaks volumes. They are safe. The world above them has changed forever. The flags on the distant buildings will be different tomorrow, but inside this room, the center of their universe has held firm. The mother begins to hum again. The same soft, soothing lullaby about the boat and the silver moon. But this time, her voice does not tremble. It fills the small, damp cellar with a beautiful, resilient warmth. Up above, the echoes in the alleys begin to fade entirely. The ancient white city of Algiers stands tall against the night sky, its heavy doors still closed, its shutters still drawn. The armies will move on. The grand strategies will unfold across the continent. But the true story of this day is not found on the maps. It is found down here, in the cool, quiet earth, where an ordinary family held tightly to one another, surviving the tide of history through the simple, quiet heroism of love, and where the heavy shadow of war was momentarily pierced by the gentle offering of a stranger in the dark. There is a kind of wind that does not merely blow, it carries the very weight of the earth within it. Beyond the whitewashed coastal cities, past the gentle, rhythmic lullaby of the Mediterranean surf, the landscape of North Africa begins to change. The soft, golden beaches and the welcoming shade of the palm grove slowly give way to something far more ancient and far more demanding. The earth here rises into sprawling, rocky plains and stretches out toward the foothills of the great mountains. It is a vast, open world painted in endless shades of ochre, rust, and pale, sun-bleached brown. And sweeping across this vastness is the wind. It is not a gentle breeze. It is a relentless, physical force. It howls across the dry plains, picking up millions of tiny, invisible grains of sand and chalky dust. It throws this dust against everything in its path, turning the bright, blue sky into a hazy, pale amber canopy. It is a wind that feels heavy, a wind that presses against the chest and pushes back against every forward step. Through this hazy, golden dust, a long, winding line of men is moving. They are marching away from the sea, walking deeper into the heart of a continent that feels entirely alien to them. They wear heavy woolen uniforms, woven for the damp chill of European winters or the crisp autumns of their hometowns. Here, beneath the glaring, unblinking eye of the African sun, that thick wool feels like a cage of fire. The straps of their heavy canvas backpacks dig deeply into their shoulders, leaving raw, aching lines across their skin. They carry everything they need to survive on their backs, and with every passing hour, that burden seems to double in weight. Listen to the sound of their marching. It is not the sharp, crisp, synchronized stepping of a parade ground. It is a slow, dragging, exhausted rhythm. Crunch. Scrape. Crunch. Scrape. It is the sound of heavy leather boots lifting, moving forward just a few inches, and falling back down against the unforgiving gravel. The sound is hypnotic, a dull, repetitive metronome that echoes across the empty valleys. After hours of walking, the sheer physical exhaustion begins to strip away the complex layers of the human mind. The men stop thinking about the grand strategies of the war. They forget about the generals, the maps, and the reasons they were sent across the ocean. Their entire universe shrinks down to the absolute simplest of realities. The next breath. The next step. The small patch of rocky ground just ahead of their boots. Dust coats everything. It settles deep into the weaves of their uniforms, turning the olive-drab fabric to a pale, ghostly beige. It cakes into the sweat on their foreheads, drawing deep, map-like lines across their young faces. It coats their eyelashes, making their eyes feel heavy and dry. And worst of all, it coats the inside of their mouths. With every breath they take, the desert wind pushes the dry, chalky earth into their throats. In the middle of the long, winding column, a young soldier is walking with his head bowed entirely toward the ground. He is a boy who grew up surrounded by water. His childhood was spent in the deep, emerald-green forests of the Pacific Northwest, where the rain fell softly for months on end, where the air always smelled of damp pine needles, rich, wet soil, and the cold, rushing water of mountain streams. Now, he is walking through an ocean of dust. He tries to swallow, but his throat is completely dry. It feels like cracked parchment. His tongue is swollen and heavy. As he forces one foot in front of the other, his exhausted mind begins to play tricks on him. He closes his tired eyes for just a second, and he can almost hear the sound of rain drumming against the tin roof of his childhood porch. He can almost feel the cool, wet mist clinging to his cheeks. He reaches his hand into the deep pocket of his trousers, letting his fingers brush against a folded letter from his mother. He brought it with him to feel close to home, but here in the desert, even the paper feels dangerously dry, as if the wind might simply turn it to ash and blow it away. He stumbles. His boot catches on a jagged, hidden rock, and his tired legs simply give way. He pitches forward, falling heavily to his knees in the dust. The sudden jolt rattles his teeth, and the heavy canvas pack on his back slides upward, pinning him to the ground. For a moment, he just stays there. He closes his eyes and rests his forehead against the warm, rough earth. The temptation to simply stop moving is overwhelming. The ground is hard, but it is still. The wind howls over him, burying him in a fine layer of sand. He feels a quiet, gentle surrender washing over him. It would be so easy, he thinks, to just close his eyes and let the desert have him. But then, a shadow falls over him, blocking out the harsh glare of the sun. He feels a strong, rough hand grab the thick canvas webbing on his shoulder. With a slow, steady heave, the weight of the pack is lifted, and he is pulled back up onto his feet. The boy blinks through the dust, his eyes stinging. Standing beside him is an older soldier from his squad. He is a quiet man, a former coal miner whose face was deeply lined before the war even began. His uniform is just as dusty, his shoulders just as slumped, but his eyes hold a deep, unwavering resilience. The marching column slowly grinds to a halt. A quiet command ripples down the line, passed from cracked lips to cracked lips. 10 minutes rest. The men drop where they stand. They do not look for shade, because there is none to be found. They simply unbuckle their heavy belts, let their packs slide into the dirt, and collapse onto the earth. They lie on their backs, staring up at the hazy, amber sky, their chests heaving as they try to pull oxygen through the swirling dust. The older soldier sits down cross-legged in the dirt, right beside the boy from the rainy forests. He does not offer a word of pity. He knows that pity is completely useless in the desert. Instead, he reaches down to his hip and unhooks his heavy, metal canteen. Water is the most precious thing in this harsh, new world. The canteens are heavy, filled at the coastal ports days ago, and the men have been ordered to guard every single drop. The older man shakes his canteen. It makes a hollow, sloshing sound. It is less than half full. He unscrews the small, black cap. He carefully wipes the rim with the back of his dusty sleeve. Then, without a word, he holds it out to the younger boy. The boy looks at the metal flask. His hands are trembling. He looks up at the older man's face, seeing the exact same terrible thirst etched into the deep lines around his eyes. To give away water in this place is to give away a piece of your own life. It is an act of profound, quiet love. The boy reaches out and takes the canteen. The metal is incredibly warm from the sun, dented and scratched from the journey. He brings it to his lips, tilts his head back, and takes a sip. It is not the cool, clear, rushing water of his mountain streams. It is warm, almost hot. It tastes strongly of aluminum, of iodine purification tablets, and of the dry dust that coats his own lips. But in this moment, it is the most glorious, beautiful thing he has ever consumed. The warm liquid slides over his swollen tongue, coating his parched throat, sinking into his exhausted body like a miracle. It is life. Pure, liquid life. He forces himself to take only one sip, then another. He lowers the canteen and hands it back, his eyes shining with a silent, overwhelming gratitude. The older man takes it, nods once, and takes a small, careful sip of his own. He screws the cap back on tight and hooks it to his belt. "Not much further today, kid," the older man whispers, his voice rasping like sandpaper. "Just put your boots in my footprints. I'll break the wind for you." It is a small, quiet promise. But out here, in the vast, indifferent emptiness of the desert, that promise is a fortress. As the afternoon slowly drags into evening, the nature of the desert begins to change. The sun, which had been a heavy, punishing weight all day, finally touches the western horizon. And as soon as it slips below the edge of the earth, the heat vanishes. It is a sudden, shocking transformation. The temperature drops rapidly, plunging the world into a deep, biting cold. The wind changes its tune. It stops howling and begins to moan, a low, hollow sound that sweeps across the cooling rocks. The marching column finally stops for the night. There are no tents to pitch, the wind would simply tear them away. The men are told to dig in, to scrape shallow resting places into the hard earth. They work in pairs, using their small, folding shovels to move the rocks and dirt. They are completely exhausted, their muscles screaming in protest, but they work with a desperate, quiet focus. They know that survival tonight depends on finding shelter from the freezing wind. When the shallow trenches are dug, the men do not sleep alone. They huddle together, 2 or 3 to a hole, pressing their bodies tight against one another. They spread their thin, woolen blankets over the top, creating a fragile barrier against the night air. Down in the dark, pressed shoulder to shoulder, the divisions of rank and background vanish entirely. They share their body heat. They share the slow, rhythmic sound of their breathing. The boy from the rainy forests lies with his back pressed against the chest of the quiet miner. He pulls his knees to his chest, shivering as the cold bites through his sweat-dampened uniform. The older man adjusts his blanket, making sure it covers the younger boy's shoulders completely. "Try to sleep," the older man whispers into the dark. The boy closes his eyes. He listens to the wind sweeping over this shallow trench. It sounds like an ocean of air, rushing endlessly across the roof of the world. But down here, pressed against the warm, solid presence of the man beside him, the wind cannot reach him. He feels a profound, quiet bond. They are not merely soldiers anymore. They are survivors, holding onto one another in the dark, anchored by the memory of a shared canteen and the comforting weight of a hand on a shoulder. Slowly, the exhaustion finally overtakes the cold. The shivering eases. The boy drifts into a deep, heavy sleep, dreaming once again of green trees and falling rain. Above them, the desert sky clears completely, revealing a canopy of stars so brilliant, so dense, and so impossibly bright that they look like crushed diamonds scattered across black velvet. The wind continues to blow, carrying the weight of the sand, washing over the sleeping men, erasing their footprints, and keeping the quiet, ancient secrets of the African night. They have survived the crushing weight of the day, and they are resting, held safe in the dark by the simple, beautiful strength of each other. Peace does not arrive with a sudden, triumphant roar, it creeps in softly, like the first pale light slipping beneath a dark and heavy door. For days, the air has been shattered by a tragic and confusing storm, a noise that did not belong in the quiet olive groves or along the gentle, sunlit shores. But now, as the late afternoon sun begins to lower itself toward the horizon, the frantic energy of the world is slowly running out. The echoes of conflict are fading, replaced by a strange, heavy, and expectant silence. It is not the silence of an empty room. It is the silence of thousands of men holding their breath, waiting in the lengthening shadows, hoping that the terrible mistake is finally coming to an end. In a small, whitewashed building near the edge of a coastal town, the light is dim and thick with the golden dust of the African afternoon. The wooden shutters are pulled half-closed against the heat, casting long, barred shadows across a simple wooden table. Around this table sit men whose uniforms are stained with the earth, their collars unbuttoned, their faces lined with a profound, aching exhaustion. These are not the grand, untouchable leaders in distant capitals. These are the men on the ground, the tired commanders who have looked into the eyes of their own soldiers and seen the devastating toll of this reluctant fight. On one side of the table sits an American, his hands resting flat on the worn wood, his fingers rough and trembling ever so slightly. Across from him sits a Frenchman, his blue tunic dusted with white plaster, his eyes carrying the sorrow of a fractured homeland. They do not speak in the booming voices of conquerors or the defiant shouts of the vanquished. They speak in whispers. The air in the room is too fragile for loud words. They lean in close, their voices a soft, rhythmic murmur blending with the distant rustle of the palm fronds outside. They are untangling the knots of a tragic misunderstanding, searching for a way to simply stop the turning wheel. The American slowly slides a single piece of paper across the table. It is a simple document, written not in the grand language of treaties, but in the plain, desperate words of men who simply wish to go home. The French officer looks at the paper. He reaches into his pocket and pulls out a fountain pen. He holds it for a moment, suspended above the parchment. In the quiet of the room, you can hear the soft, shallow breathing of the men around the table. The Frenchman looks up, meeting the eyes of the American. There is no anger in that gaze. There is only a deep, shared well of grief for the boys who fell in the surf and the fields, and a profound, wordless plea for grace. The American gives a small, almost imperceptible nod. The pen touches the paper. The scratching of the nib is the loudest sound in the room. It is a tiny, scraping noise, yet it is heavy enough to stop an army. As the signature is finished, the tension in the room simply dissolves. It does not break, it exhales. The French officer gently lays the pen down. The American reaches across the table, his hand open and empty. The Frenchman takes it. It is a long, firm, and completely silent handshake. In the shadows of that dusty room, a truce is spoken, not with fanfares, but with the quiet, devastating relief of men who no longer have to ask their brothers to do the unthinkable. Outside, the sun dips lower, turning the sky into a canvas of bruised purple and soft, melancholic rose. The news does not travel through the lines like a lightning bolt. It moves like a gentle ripple across a still pond. It is a whisper carried on the warm evening wind. Down in the shallow trenches and behind the low stone walls, the young soldiers are waiting. They are covered in the pale dust of the earth, their eyes heavy, their hands gripping their rifles with an anxious, white-knuckled ache. They are so tired. They are tired of the noise, tired of the fear, tired of the terrible burden of looking across a field and seeing a man who looks just like their own cousins, their own friends, wearing a different color of wool. Suddenly, a voice drifts down the line. It is soft, almost conversational. Ceasefire. The words are repeated, passing from one dusty foxhole to the next. Ceasefire. Hold your positions. It's over. From the other side of the fields, from behind the olive trees and the ruined farmhouse walls, a similar ripple of sound is moving. Cessez le feu. Ne tires plus. Watch the young American boy leaning against the trunk of an ancient fig tree. When he hears the whisper, he does not cheer. He does not jump up or wave his arms. He simply closes his eyes and lets his head fall back against the rough bark. He takes a breath so deep and so long that his entire chest shivers with the effort. Slowly, his fingers begin to uncurl from the wooden stock of his rifle. For days, that weapon has been an extension of his own body, a heavy, terrible anchor. Now, as he loosens his grip, it is just a piece of wood and steel. He lets it slide down his leg, the metal barrel coming to rest in the soft dirt with a quiet, dull thud. The physical relief is overwhelming. It washes over him like a warm wave, unknotting the tight muscles in his shoulders, loosening the hard clench of his jaw. He rubs his dirty hands over his face, feeling the grit and the sweat, and for the first time since he stepped off the landing craft into the black ocean, he feels entirely human again. All across the landscape, men are standing up. They rise slowly from the tall grass and the rocky outcrops, like ghosts materializing in the twilight. They step out of the shadows, leaving their weapons in the dirt. There is a profound, surreal beauty to this moment. In a wide, dusty clearing between two rolling hills, the two sides begin to walk toward one another. There is no order given for this. It is simply the magnetic pull of shared humanity, drawing them out of the dark. They walk with their hands by their sides, their palms open to the cooling evening air. A young infantryman from the rolling plains of the American Midwest stops in the center of the clearing. Walking toward him is a soldier from a small, coastal village in France. They are both barely 20 years old. They stop just a few feet apart, the space between them filled with the warm, fragrant scent of wild thyme and the fading light of the day. For a moment, they just look at each other. They see the exact same exhaustion, the exact same hollow fear that has now been replaced by a quiet, trembling grace. The American boy slowly reaches into the front pocket of his canvas jacket. He pulls out a crushed, slightly battered pack of cigarettes. There are only 2 left. He places one between his own dry lips and gently offers the other to the French boy. The French soldier takes it with a nod. He reaches into his own pocket, producing a small brass matchbox. He strikes the match, the tiny flame flaring bright yellow in the gathering dusk. He steps close to the American, cupping his hands around the flame to protect it from the gentle wind, and holds it up. The American leans in, his face illuminated by the warm light, and breathes in. The French soldier lights his own, then shakes the match out, letting the thin trail of white smoke drift up toward the first stars appearing in the sky. They do not share a common language. They have no words to explain the absurdity of the last few days, or the sorrow they feel for the men who will not see this beautiful evening. But as they stand there in the quiet clearing, blowing soft clouds of smoke into the twilight, the silence is a perfect, healing balm. It is a truce spoken entirely in shadows, forged in the simple, everyday act of sharing a small comfort in the dark. Further down the line, an American medic is sitting on the bumper of a dusty Jeep. The engine is cold and quiet. He has a small, leather-bound journal resting on his knee, and a stubby pencil pinched between his fingers. He is writing a letter to his mother, squinting in the fading light. "The guns have stopped," he writes, his handwriting soft and flowing. "I am sitting in a field, and it is so quiet you can hear the wind moving through the grass. The men we were fighting are sitting just a little ways down the road. They are just like us, Ma. They are just tired boys who want to take their boots off and sleep. A fellow just brought me a cup of hot tea. I don't know his name, and I couldn't understand a word he said, but he smiled at me, and I smiled back. We are safe tonight. Please do not worry anymore. The sky here is so big, and tonight, it is entirely peaceful." He closes the journal, tracing the smooth leather cover with his thumb. He looks up at the sky. It is a vast, endless dome of deep indigo, pierced by the bright, steady light of 1,000 stars. The night settles over the North African coast, wrapping the tired armies in a thick, protective blanket of dark. The fires are lit, small, flickering beacons of warmth dotting the hillsides. Men gather around them, shoulders brushing against one another, the differences in their uniforms rendered completely invisible by the night. They pass around canteens of water, pieces of hard bread, and quiet, low murmurs of conversation. There is no victory celebration. There are no grand speeches. The profound grace of this night is found in its absolute simplicity. It is found in the ability to close one's eyes without fear. It is found in the heavy, dreamless sleep of men who have laid their burdens down in the dust. Listen to the quiet of the land. The ocean waves continue their eternal, soothing rhythm against the distant beaches. Shush! 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 The wind sweeps gently through the olive groves, rustling the silver leaves, carrying away the echoes of the conflict, leaving only the ancient, enduring peace of the earth. The fragile truce, born in a dusty room and whispered across the shadows, holds firm. The world is finally still. The boys are safe. Rest now, beneath the vast and quiet sky. The heavy darkness has passed, and tonight, the only thing they must surrender to is the deep, comforting embrace of sleep. There is a rhythm to walking a long road that eventually becomes the only heartbeat you can hear. The truce has settled softly over the coastal hills, leaving behind a profound and fragile quiet. The echoes of the first confusing days have been swallowed by the vast, open spaces of the continent. But the journey is not over. It has simply changed its shape. The destination now lies far to the east, a place called Tunis, resting somewhere beyond the horizon, hidden behind endless miles of dry earth and ancient stone. To the men in the grand war rooms, it is a strategic point on a painted map. But to the young men on the ground, Tunis is not a strategy. It is simply the end of a very long, very dusty road. Listen to the sound of the march. It is a slow, heavy, and mesmerizing sound. Crunch. Shuffle. Crunch. Shuffle. Thousands of heavy leather boots striking the uneven gravel, lifting a fine, pale chalk into the warm air. The dust coats everything. It settles into the weave of their woolen trousers, it turns their dark hair a ghostly white, and it paints their eyelashes with the color of the desert. They are a river of men, flowing slowly eastward under a vast, unblinking sky. When you walk for hours upon hours, the grand concepts of the world slip away entirely. You stop thinking about history. You stop thinking about tomorrow. Your entire universe shrinks down to the space of a single footstep. The boots they wear were made in busy factories far across the ocean. They are thick, heavy, and unyielding. In the damp cold of a training camp, they felt like sturdy armor. But here, on the baking, rocky roads of North Africa, they feel like cages of iron. With every mile, the friction builds. Blisters form on tired heels and aching toes, raising tight, painful bubbles of skin that eventually break, only to form again. The ache is deep and persistent, a heavy, throbbing pull that starts in the soles of the feet and travels slowly up the calves, settling deep into the bones of the spine. Yet, they keep walking. To survive this kind of relentless, physical exhaustion, the mind must learn to travel away from the body. It must find a quiet, safe place to hide while the legs continue their mechanical, hypnotic labor. In the middle of the long column, a young soldier from a quiet farming town in the American Midwest walks with his head bowed. The midday sun is beating down on his steel helmet, radiating heat into his shoulders. His feet are burning, crying out for rest. But in his mind, he is not on a dusty road in Africa. He has closed his eyes to the glare, and he has gone home. He matches the rhythm of his heavy footsteps to the memory of a porch swing. Creak. Sway. Creak. Sway. He imagines the soft, warm breeze of a late summer evening in Ohio. He can smell the sweet, rich scent of freshly cut alfalfa and the damp earth of the fields turning over for the night. He imagines his mother standing behind the screen door, wiping her hands on a flour-dusted apron, the soft, yellow light of the kitchen pouring out onto the wooden floorboards. He holds onto that image with a desperate, beautiful grip. The porch swing in his mind moves back and forth, and with every imaginary sway, another real footstep falls against the African dirt. He is walking through the pain by walking through his own memories. Hours bleed into one another. The landscape offers no shade, only rolling hills of scrub brush, pale rocks, and the shimmering, watery mirages that dance on the horizon. Finally, a quiet murmur rolls down the line, passed from cracked lips to cracked lips. The column is halting. A 10-minute rest. The relief that washes over the men is profound and absolute. They do not look for comfortable spots, they simply collapse exactly where they stand. They let their heavy canvas packs slide from their bruised shoulders, hitting the dust with a soft, heavy thud. They sit on the ground, leaning back against their bedrolls, completely spent. Down the line, a young medic sits against a low, crumbling stone wall. His hands are trembling slightly from the sheer exertion of the morning. His first instinct is not to reach for his warm canteen, nor to close his eyes and sleep. Instead, his dirty, calloused fingers reach up to the left breast pocket of his tunic. The pocket that rests directly over his heart. He unbuttons the small flap and gently pulls out a small, square photograph. It is dog-eared and worn. The edges of the thick paper are soft and frayed, curved from the shape of his body, carrying a faint smudge of engine oil and the pale dust of the road. It is the most fragile thing he owns, and yet it is the strongest armor he has. He holds it carefully in both hands, resting his wrists on his knees, and stares into the image. It is a picture of a young woman standing beside a wooden fence. She is wearing a simple cotton dress, the wind catching the hem, and she is smiling a brilliant, unbothered smile straight into the camera lens. The photograph is in black and white, but the medic does not need color to remember. He knows the exact shade of her pale blue eyes. He knows the sound of her laugh, the way she hummed when she was nervous, the scent of lavender soap on her wrists. He brushes his thumb gently across her paper cheek. The ache in his blistered feet does not vanish, but it suddenly feels distant, as if it belongs to someone else. The photograph is a tiny, magical window. It proves that a gentle, beautiful world still exists. It proves that he has a reason to endure the dust, the heat, and the endless, punishing miles. He is not just walking toward Tunis. He is walking toward the day he can hand this photograph back to her and hold her real, warm hands instead. He whispers a quiet, breathless promise to the picture, tucks it carefully back into the pocket over his heart, and buttons the flap. The quiet strength found in these small moments is the invisible thread pulling the entire army forward. It is not anger that fuels them, nor grand ideals of conquest. It is love. It is the profound, aching longing for the simple, ordinary grace of home. The command to move out drifts down the road. It is a difficult, groaning process. Muscles that had just begun to cool and relax suddenly scream in protest as the men force themselves back to their feet. The backpacks feel twice as heavy as they did 10 minutes ago. As they step back onto the road, a younger boy, barely 18, stumbles. His legs simply refuse to hold the weight, and he pitches forward, his knees hitting the gravel. Before he can even try to push himself up, an older sergeant is there. The sergeant does not yell. He does not order the boy to be tough. He simply reaches down, grabs the canvas strap of the boy's heavy rifle, and slings it over his own shoulder, adding the weight to his own heavy burden. Then, he offers a strong, steady hand to the fallen boy. "Just hold onto my belt," the sergeant whispers, his voice low and comforting. "Just watch the back of my boots. I'll pull you for a while." The boy nods, too exhausted to speak. He grabs the thick canvas webbing of the sergeant's belt. They walk together, a chain of shared endurance. This is the quiet heroism of the long road. It is the willingness to carry a little more so that a brother might not break. They lean on one another, their shoulders brushing in the heat, creating a collective, stubborn resilience that no physical pain can defeat. As the long day finally begins to loosen its grip, the sun dips low in the western sky behind them. The harsh, blinding glare softens into a beautiful, liquid gold that washes across the pale earth. The shadows of the marching men stretch out long and thin ahead of them, pointing the way east. The temperature begins to drop rapidly. The blazing heat of the afternoon gives way to a cool, forgiving evening breeze that smells of dry sage and distant ocean salt. It is the most welcome feeling in the world. The column finally comes to a halt for the night. They pull off the road, settling into a wide, shallow valley. There is no energy left for building elaborate camps. They simply drop their gear and sit. Now comes the most careful, delicate ritual of the day. The removal of the boots. Fingers stiff with exhaustion slowly untie the heavy laces. They pull the thick leather away from swollen, tender skin. The cool evening air hitting their bare feet is an exquisite, shivering relief. They sit quietly in the twilight, examining the blisters, wrapping them gently in clean white gauze from their small first aid kits, preparing their bodies for the punishment of tomorrow. As the purple twilight deepens into a vast, starry night, the camp grows quiet. The men wrap themselves tightly in their thin wool blankets. Some lie on their backs, staring up at the African sky. The stars here are incredibly bright, scattered like crushed diamonds across a dome of black velvet. A few small, shielded flashlights click on. The soft, yellow beams illuminate the pages of small leather notebooks. Pencils scratch quietly in the dark. "Dear Mother," a young soldier writes, resting his notebook on his raised knee. "We walked a very long way today. The country here is strange and dry, but there is a quiet beauty to it when the sun goes down. My feet ache, but please do not worry. I am eating well, and the boys look out for one another. I look at your picture every single day. It gives me strength. I hope the weather is turning cool at home, and I hope the porch light is still on. I am walking closer to it every day." He folds the letter carefully, making sure the creases are perfect, and slides it into an envelope. He places it next to the dog-eared photograph in his breast pocket. The camp settles into sleep. The only sound is the gentle rustle of the wind through the dry scrub brush and the slow, steady, synchronized breathing of thousands of exhausted men. They are perfectly still now, their blistered feet resting in the cool dark. The road to Tunis is still out there, waiting in the shadows. It is long, and it is hard, and it will demand more of them tomorrow. But tonight, they are at peace. They are suspended in the quiet dark, held together by the memories they carry and the letters they write. They dream of green trees, of soft beds, of the gentle touch of a loved one's hand. Let them rest. Let the cool night air soothe their aching bones. They have endured the weight of the day, moving forward with quiet, unshakable grace. Their footsteps on the dusty road may be walking toward a foreign city, but their hearts, beating softly beneath those faded, dog-eared photographs, are taking them on a long, slow journey all the way home. There is a profound, aching weariness that comes when the sky finally forgets how to shine. When the young men first arrived on these ancient shores, they were told stories of endless sun, of blowing sand, and of a dry, shimmering heat that would bake the very thoughts from their minds. They had learned to march through the dust. They had braced themselves for the desert. But the continent of Africa holds its own deep, ancient secrets, and as the wheel of the year turned, the vast, blue sky began to bruise. Heavy, slate-gray clouds rolled in from the Mediterranean, sinking low and heavy over the valleys and the rocky hills. And then, the rain began to fall. Not a gentle, passing shower, but a relentless, freezing, heavy downpour that felt as though the ocean itself had been lifted up and poured entirely over the earth. The golden dust of the long roads instantly transformed. It became something completely new, something thick, heavy, and infinitely stubborn. Mud. It was a dark, clay-like paste that clung to everything it touched. It wrapped around the heavy leather boots of the marching columns, adding pounds of dead weight to every single, agonizing step. It sucked at the tires of the great supply trucks, swallowing them up to their axles, turning the mighty machines into helpless, sinking islands in a sea of brown water. The world lost its sharp edges. Everything became a soft, freezing, sodden blur. To live in the winter rain is to live with a constant, shivering companion. The heavy woolen uniforms, which had been a stifling burden in the heat of the sun, now became freezing, heavy sponges. The cold seeped through the wet fabric, creeping across the skin, settling deep into the marrow of their bones. The men lived in a state of perpetual dampness. Their canvas tents offered little sanctuary. The rain drummed against the fabric with a loud, chaotic rhythm, eventually finding every tiny seam, dripping slowly and methodically onto their exhausted faces as they tried to sleep. In a flooded, shallow foxhole, a young boy from a dry, sun-baked town in Texas sits with his knees pulled tightly to his chest. His helmet is tilted forward, creating a tiny, fragile roof against the downpour. Water cascades off the steel brim in a continuous, glittering sheet. His hands are pale with cold, shaking violently as he holds a small, rectangular piece of wax paper. Inside the wax paper is a letter from his wife. He dare not open it. If he exposes the delicate paper to this damp air, the ink will run, and her beautiful, sloping words will be washed away forever. So he simply holds the little waterproof packet against his cheek. He closes his eyes and imagines her sitting by a warm, crackling fireplace back home. He tries to pull the imaginary heat from her living room all the way across the world, right into this freezing trench. The rain beats down, a heavy, deafening roar, but the wax paper holds strong. It is a tiny, dry sanctuary of love in a world entirely made of water. Yet, it is in these very moments, when the misery is so absolute that it feels almost comical, that the human spirit does something truly remarkable. It refuses to sink. Down the line, a sergeant is trying to navigate a particularly steep, muddy incline. He is carrying a heavy tin pot of lukewarm soup, his shoulders hunched against the freezing wind. He places his boot carefully, but the mud has a mind of its own. His foot flies out from under him, and he slides down the bank on his back, a slow, ridiculous descent into the muck, the soup splashing spectacularly over his own chest. For a moment, there is a stunned, breathless silence. The men shivering in their holes stare at the sergeant, covered in brown mud and pale, watery soup. And then, a sound breaks through the heavy drumming of the rain. It is a chuckle. A quiet, bubbling laugh from a boy in the nearest trench. It spreads. The sergeant looks down at himself, wipes a piece of soggy potato from his cheek, sighs a long, exaggerated sigh, and begins to laugh, too. It is a deep, rich, belly laugh. Soon, the entire line is laughing. The sound cuts through the freezing wind. It is a brilliant, defiant spark of warmth. They are laughing at the sheer absurdity of it all, at the ridiculous, pathetic reality of their situation. In that shared, muddy laughter, the cold loses its bite just a little. They look at one another, covered head to toe in the wet earth, and they realize that if they can still laugh, the storm has not truly defeated them. As the afternoon drags into evening, the sky turns a deeper shade of charcoal. The heavy rain finally softens into a fine, freezing mist that hangs in the air like a silver veil. The men huddle together in small groups under whatever scraps of canvas they can string between the ruined olive trees. In one of these makeshift shelters, 3 soldiers are huddled around a tiny, sputtering flame. They have managed, through sheer, stubborn willpower, to heat a small metal cup of instant coffee. The dark liquid is boiling, sending a thin, glorious ribbon of steam up into the damp air. The smell is intoxicating. It is the aroma of comfort, of Sunday mornings, of a world that is safe and completely dry. The soldier holding the cup takes a slow, careful sip. The heat floods his chest, a beautiful, liquid fire. He does not drink at all. He wipes the rim and passes it to the man shivering beside him. The second man takes it with trembling hands, his eyes closing in pure bliss as the warm tin touches his lips. They pass the single cup around the circle, a silent, holy communion in the mud. They don't speak. They just share the heat. It is a quiet grace, the simple, profound act of giving away a portion of your own warmth so that a brother might stop shivering. Somewhere in the misty dark, a beautiful sound begins to float through the camp. It is the soft, reedy sigh of a harmonica. A soldier, unseen in the gloom, has cupped the small metal instrument in his hands, breathing life into the cold night. He is playing a slow, mournful tune, an old song about long goodbyes and distant shores. The notes rise up, weaving through the falling mist, echoing gently off the muddy hills. The men stop what they are doing. They simply sit and listen. The music is a tether, connecting them all in the dark. It acknowledges their sorrow, their aching bones, and their profound homesickness, but it wraps those feelings in something incredibly gentle and beautiful. It tells them that even in the deepest mud, beauty still exists, hiding just beneath the surface. A boy from a busy city rests his head against his canvas pack and hums along softly, the vibration soothing his tight, anxious chest. The rain begins to fall a little heavier again, returning to a steady, hypnotic rhythm against the earth. Shoo, shoo, shoo. It is the ancient sound of the world being washed clean. The men learn to surrender to it. They realize that they cannot fight the sky. They can only wait for the clouds to break. They pull their wet blankets tighter around their shoulders, drawing as close to one another as they can. They find comfort in the gentle rise and fall of their sleeping companions' chests, the steady, rhythmic proof of life in the dark. They are cold, and they are wet, but they are together. They are held fast by the invisible, unbreakable threads of shared misery, shared laughter, and shared hope. The thick African mud may coat their uniforms, it may swallow their heavy boots, and it may chill their skin, but it cannot touch the quiet, enduring light within them. So let the rain fall. Let it drum its chaotic lullaby against the canvas. Let the night be long and cold and gray. Inside the hearts of the sleeping men, a warm, bright memory of home still burns. It is a quiet, stubborn ember that no winter storm can ever wash away. Rest now, in the silver mist. Close your heavy, tired eyes. The rain is just water, and the mud is just earth. The morning will eventually bring a new light, the clouds will part, and the ground, in its own gentle time, will finally dry. There is a profound, trembling beauty in the moment a heavy door is finally opened to the sun. The storm has rolled past the ancient coastal cities. The rumble of heavy engines and the sharp, terrifying echoes of conflict have faded into a distant memory, replaced once again by the deep, familiar sigh of the Mediterranean Sea. For days, the narrow, winding streets of the Medinas have held their breath. Heavy wooden shutters were latched tight against the world. The beautiful, chaotic symphony of daily life was silenced by the heavy, anxious blanket of the unknown. But this morning, the air is different. It is light. It is clear. It is the morning of the aftermath, where fear slowly unspools and turns into a quiet, tentative relief. Listen to the sound of the city waking up. It begins not with a shout, but with the soft, metallic click of a deadbolt being thrown back. A heavy wooden door creaks open on ancient iron hinges, just a fraction of an inch at first. An older man peers out into the winding alleyway. The cobblestones are empty of marching boots. The sky above the narrow canyon of whitewashed walls is a brilliant, untroubled blue. He pushes the door wider, stepping out onto the stone stoop, and takes a long, deep breath. The scent of diesel and dust has been washed away by the ocean breeze, replaced by the sweet, earthy fragrance of dried jasmine, orange blossoms, and the familiar, comforting smell of wood smoke drifting from a communal clay oven. All across the labyrinth of the old city, the shutters are slowly pushed outward. Windows are opened to catch the gentle morning breeze. The people step out onto their wrought iron balconies and their doorsteps, their eyes adjusting to the bright light of a new reality. They see the foreign soldiers, but the terrifying, faceless silhouettes of the night have become just men in the daylight. They are tired men, sitting on the low stone walls, their heavy helmets resting in their laps, their faces covered in the pale dust of the long, weary roads. In a small, sunlit square, a young American boy in a wrinkled olive uniform sits on the edge of a dry stone fountain. He is leaning forward, his elbows resting on his knees, his hands loosely clasped. He feels incredibly large and completely out of place in this delicate, ancient world. He looks down at the intricate mosaic tiles beneath his dusty boots, marveling at the quiet craftsmanship, the vibrant blues and greens that have survived centuries of human history. From the shadow of a nearby archway, a little boy is watching him. The child is perhaps 6 or 7 years old, wearing a faded linen shirt that is slightly too large for his small shoulders. His dark, intelligent eyes are wide with an intense, cautious curiosity. He has never seen a man quite like this before, dressed in strange green wool, looking so overwhelmingly tired. The soldier looks up and catches the boy's eye. For a moment, they just stare at one another across the sunlit cobblestones, two entirely different worlds suspended in a quiet, fragile pause. The soldier does not stand up. He knows that his height and his heavy gear might frighten the child away. Instead, he offers a soft, exhausted smile. He reaches into the deep pocket of his canvas jacket and pulls out a small, rectangular package wrapped in silver foil. It is a piece of hard, sweet chocolate from his field rations. He rests it gently on the edge of the stone fountain, gives the boy another small, encouraging smile, and slowly leans back, resting his hands quietly in his lap to show he means absolutely no harm. The little boy hesitates. He looks back at the safety of the shadowed archway, then back at the foil shining brilliantly in the morning sun. Slowly, one silent step at a time, he moves out of the shadows. His bare feet make no sound on the warm stones. He approaches the fountain, his eyes darting quickly between the soldier's face and the small, silver gift. When he is close enough, he reaches out a tiny, trembling hand and snatches the chocolate. He takes 2 quick steps backward, unwraps the foil with practiced speed, and takes a bite. The sweetness hits him, and a brilliant, blinding smile breaks across his face. It is a smile so pure, so completely devoid of the world's heavy sorrows, that it hits the young soldier right in the chest. The soldier chuckles, a low, warm, rumbling sound. The boy giggles in return, his shoulders dropping, the fear entirely forgotten. In that small, completely ordinary exchange, the heavy, invisible walls of the war come tumbling down. The soldier is no longer a stranger from across the dark sea. He is just a tired boy who shared his chocolate. And the child is just a child, reveling in the simple, perfect joy of a sweet treat on a sunny morning. These quiet, beautiful moments begin to bloom all across the liberated cities. The grand sweep of history dissolves into thousands of tiny, humanizing interactions. In a narrow alleyway draped with colorful, woven rugs airing in the sun, an older woman walks up to a group of soldiers resting against a stucco wall. She carries a silver tray holding small, delicate glass cups filled with steaming, sweet mint tea. She does not speak their language, and they do not speak hers. But as she hands the warm glasses to the young men, she places her right hand gently, gracefully over her heart. It is the universal gesture of welcome, of peace, of profound gratitude that the storm has passed without breaking their homes. The soldiers take the tea, murmuring soft, reverent words of thanks, their eyes shining with a sudden, unexpected emotion. The warm glass feels incredible in their rough, calloused hands. As they sip the sweet, fragrant liquid, the tension of the past few weeks finally begins to melt away from their tired shoulders. They look around at the white walls, the bright blue doors, the scarlet flowers blooming in terracotta pots, and they realize the immense, quiet privilege of sitting in this beautiful place in peace. As the long, warm afternoon stretches out, the rhythm of everyday life tentatively resumes. The merchants unroll their canvas awnings. The soft, rhythmic sound of sweeping brooms echoes on the ancient stones. The children, emboldened by the chocolate and the gentle smiles of the tired giants in their streets, begin to play again. Their laughter bounces off the walls, a beautiful, healing balm to the tired ears of the soldiers who had heard nothing but the roar of the ocean and the wind for so long. In a quiet courtyard, an older sergeant sits on a wooden crate, his notepad resting on his knee. He is writing a letter to his wife back home. The sun is shining today, his pencil scratches softly against the paper. The city is so old and so incredibly beautiful, full of winding streets and bright white walls. But the most beautiful thing of all is the people. A little girl just brought me a bright yellow flower. I tucked it behind my ear to make her laugh, and she laughed so hard she had to sit down in the dirt. We were so afraid of this place in the dark, my love. But in the light, it is just filled with mothers and fathers and children who want the exact same things we do. They just want to be safe in their homes. I think of our own porch, and I feel so completely grateful that the world is still capable of such gentle things. He folds the letter carefully, sealing the warm memory of that child's laughter inside the paper. It is a completely different kind of letter than the ones he wrote on the terrifying, pitching decks of the transport ships. It is a letter written from a place of healing, a place where the humanity of the world has stubbornly, beautifully refused to be extinguished. Then, the sun begins its slow, heavy descent toward the western horizon. The sky over the Mediterranean turns a soft, bruised purple, melting seamlessly into shades of rose and deep, quiet indigo. The shadows in the narrow alleys begin to lengthen, bringing a cool, gentle relief from the heat of the day. But tonight, the coming of the dark does not bring fear. Tonight, the heavy blackout curtains are left open. For the first time in what feels like an eternity, the cities do not have to hide their faces from the sky. As the twilight deepens into velvet black, a beautiful, magical transformation occurs. Down the winding streets of the Medinas, the lanterns are lit. One by one, small flames flicker to life behind ornate panels of colored glass. Amber, ruby, emerald, and sapphire. The soft, warm light spills out from the doorways and the open windows, washing over the ancient cobblestones in a mosaic of glowing colors. The entire city begins to softly glow against the night sky, like a handful of precious jewels scattered on a dark blanket. The soldiers, leaning casually out of the windows of their billeted rooms, or sitting quietly on the edges of the fountains, watch in absolute awe. The light is incredibly soothing. It is the physical, radiant manifestation of peace. The colored lanterns sway gently in the evening breeze, casting dancing, warm shadows on the white stucco walls. The scent of roasting meats, rich cumin, and sweet cinnamon fills the air, a promise of warm meals and full, content bellies. The local families sit in their illuminated courtyards, their voices a low, comforting murmur that blends perfectly with the distant, rhythmic lullaby of the ocean. The children are sleeping now, their faces washed in the soft, protective light of the oil lamps, their dreams safe and completely unbroken. The soldiers sit in the glow of the streets, resting their tired heads against the ancient stones. They are all bathed in the exact same beautiful light. There is no division tonight. There are no borders, no uniforms, no distant, rumbling wars. There is only this beautiful, ancient city, breathing softly, rising and falling in the dark. There is only the quiet, enduring warmth of the lanterns, holding back the shadows, promising that the morning will come, and that it will be kind. Listen to the wind moving gently through the narrow streets. It carries the sound of a world slowly healing itself. It rustles the dry palm fronds and whispers against the colored glass of the lamps. You can let your shoulders drop now. You can let your breathing slow, matching the ancient, steady rhythm of the gentle sea. The storm has passed over the shore. The lanterns are burning bright and steady in the Medinas. Close your eyes and let the warm, ancient light wrap around you. Let it carry you, safely and quietly, into a deep, peaceful, and unbroken sleep. When the terrible roar of the world finally fades, the loudest sound left behind is the beating of your own, surviving heart. The great storm of the landing has passed. The heavy, frantic energy that carried the young men across the dark water and up the golden beaches has slowly drained away, leaving behind a profound and echoing stillness. The front lines have pushed forward, moving the noise of history further inland, and in their wake, a quiet space has opened up upon the African earth. It is late afternoon. The sun, which had been a harsh and unblinking eye all day, is finally softening into a rich, liquid gold. It casts long, gentle shadows across the temporary encampments, turning the swirling desert dust into a fine, glowing mist. In this golden, hazy twilight, the men finally have a moment to simply stop. They drop their heavy canvas packs into the soft dirt. They take off their steel helmets, letting the cool evening breeze run through their damp, matted hair. They sit. And as the physical exhaustion settles deep into their bones, a different kind of ache begins to rise in their chests. It is the overwhelming, desperate need to reach back across the ocean. They need to cast a line to the world they left behind, to prove to the people who love them, and to themselves, that they are still here. All across the encampment, a quiet, beautiful ritual begins. A young soldier walks over to a dusty jeep parked beneath the sparse shade of an ancient, twisted olive tree. The metal hood of the vehicle is still warm from the day's driving. He sweeps his calloused hand across the flat surface, brushing away a thick layer of pale, chalky dust, creating a makeshift desk in the wilderness. From the deep pocket of his woolen trousers, he pulls out a crumpled piece of thin stationery and a stubby, wooden pencil. He leans over the hood, his shoulders rounding with exhaustion. He stares at the blank, fragile paper. How do you find the words to explain the absolute miracle of a continuing breath? How do you describe the immense, terrifying vastness of the ocean, or the freezing spray of the surf, to a mother who has only ever known the quiet, predictable turning of the seasons on a family farm? He decides, in the quiet wisdom of the exhausted, that he will not write about the dark things. He presses the lead to the paper. The soft, scratching sound is incredibly loud in the still evening air. He writes about the sky. He tells her that the African sunset is the most beautiful shade of bruised purple and bright peach he has ever seen. He writes about the smell of the earth, how it smells like crushed spices and ancient, dry heat. He tells her that he is eating well, a gentle fiction to soothe her worried heart. And then, he writes the only words that truly matter. I am safe. I am whole. I am sitting in the quiet evening, and I am thinking of the old oak tree in the front yard. I am thinking of you. He finishes the letter, his hand trembling just a little, and carefully folds it. As he does, a single, heavy drop of sweat falls from his brow, landing right on the edge of the paper. It leaves a small, damp circle in the dust of the page. He doesn't wipe it away. It is a piece of himself, a tiny, watery proof of his survival, traveling thousands of miles to rest in his mother's hands. A little further down the hill, inside a large, olive-drab canvas tent, the atmosphere is heavy and hushed. The sides of the tent are rolled up to let the breeze flow through, and a single kerosene lantern hangs from the center pole, casting a warm, amber glow over the faces of the men sitting inside. They are sitting on their canvas cots, completely silent. Some are mending torn uniforms, others are simply staring at the floorboards, lost in the deep labyrinth of their own thoughts. In the corner, a corporal sits with a fountain pen and a leather-bound journal. He is writing to his young wife. He writes about the extraordinary brothers he has found in this strange, dusty place. He writes about the man from the city who shared his last dry biscuit in the freezing rain, and the boy from the mountains who knows how to make a tune out of nothing but a blade of grass and a breath of air. He writes, I never knew I could love strangers so much. We are entirely different, you and I, and all these boys, but the sand has made us the same. When the dark comes, we hold on to each other with a quiet strength that I cannot begin to describe. I feel you with me, my love. Every time the wind blows, I pretend it is your hand brushing against my cheek. But intertwined with this profound, beautiful relief of survival is a heavy, lingering sorrow. It is a sorrow that sits quietly in the empty spaces between the men. Because for every man sitting in the golden dust, writing a letter home, there is a shadow. There are empty cots in the tents. There are canvas bags resting quietly in the corner, holding the neatly folded clothes, the dog-eared photographs, and the unsmoked cigarettes of the boys who did not walk off the beaches. The ocean surf is still crashing against the Moroccan and Algerian shores, a gentle, eternal rhythm. Shush! 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 It washes over the golden sand, smoothing away the heavy footprints, returning the beach to its ancient, untouched peace. But the men in the camps carry those shores within them. They carry the memories of the boys who fell in the dark, the boys who slipped beneath the freezing waves, the boys whose journey ended before the African sun could even rise. This sorrow is not spoken of loudly. It is held with a deep, crushing reverence. Behind the medical tent, sitting alone on a wooden crate, an older sergeant is writing the most difficult letter of his life. He rests the paper on his knee. The lantern light catches the silver tracks of quiet tears shining on his dusty, weather-beaten face. He is writing to the parents of a boy from his squad. A boy who had lied about his age to join, a boy who had a laugh so bright it could light up the dark belly of a transport ship. The sergeant does not write about the chaos of the landing or the harsh reality of the surf. He writes about the boy's spirit. He writes, Your son was the bravest among us, not because he was without fear, but because he carried his fear with such incredible grace. Last week, on the ship, he stayed awake for hours just to talk a frightened younger soldier through the night. He had a heart so large it seemed to hold the whole world. I want you to know that he was not alone. We were with him. He is resting now, beneath a very wide and very beautiful sky. The sergeant pauses, his chest heaving with a silent, ragged breath. He folds the letter. It is a devastating burden, to be the one to send the dark clouds back to a sunny home. But it is the ultimate act of everyday heroism. It is the quiet, agonizing duty of carrying the memory of the fallen, ensuring that the love they brought into the world does not end in the sand, but finds its way back to the people who gave it to them. As the evening deepens into night, a male clerk begins to walk softly through the camp. He carries a large, heavy canvas sack over his shoulder. He moves from the jeeps, to the tents, to the quiet corners under the trees. He is not just a soldier collecting paper, he is a shepherd of souls. The men hand their folded letters to him with an incredible gentleness. You can hear the soft, whispering shhh of the paper slipping into the canvas bag. Drop by drop, the bag fills. It becomes heavy. It is perhaps the heaviest thing in the entire encampment. Inside that rough canvas sack is the concentrated heartbeat of thousands of men. There are whispered prayers, apologies for arguments left unresolved, promises to return, descriptions of the stars, and the tear-stained farewells to fallen friends. It is a bag full of pure, unfiltered human truth, written in the dust, sealed with tired hands, and set entirely on faith. The clerk ties the thick rope at the top of the bag. Tomorrow, that bag will be loaded onto a truck. It will travel back down the winding, dusty roads to the ports. It will be carried up the wooden gangways onto the great, gray ships. It will cross the vast, black ocean, sailing through the fog and the deep swells, protected by the sheer force of the love it contains. And eventually, weeks from now, those fragile pieces of paper will be slipped into metal mailboxes on quiet, tree-lined streets. They will be opened by trembling hands on front porches and in brightly lit kitchens, and the distance between the worlds will finally collapse. But for tonight, the writing is done. The men have emptied their hearts onto the paper, and in doing so, they have made a little more room in their chests to breathe. The camp falls entirely silent. The kerosene lanterns are twisted down, their amber light fading into a small, dying orange ember before extinguishing completely. The African night claims the desert once more. The sky is a vast, endless dome of deep, velvety indigo, pierced by the brilliant, steady light of ancient stars. The wind sweeps low over the rolling hills, a gentle, soothing rush of air that rustles the canvas tents and cools the warm metal of the jeeps. Listen to the wind. It sounds like a long, slow exhale. The men lie on their cots, wrapped tightly in their woolen blankets. The dust is still on their faces, the ache is still in their bones, but their minds are at peace. They have reached out into the dark and found the invisible hands of the people they love. They have honored the boys who sleep by the sea. They have survived the fire, and they have remembered who they are. There is nothing left to do now but rest. The letters are safe in the dark, waiting for the morning. The world is spinning slowly, gently, carrying the thoughts of the tired soldiers back toward the west. Close your eyes, and let the quiet wind wash over you. The night is completely still, the dust has finally settled, and you are held safe, wrapped in the quiet, enduring comfort of a million whispered words of love. Sleep now, in the gentle dark. In the deepest hollows of the night, when the rest of the world has surrendered to the dark, the most profound courage is found simply in the gentle reach of a quiet hand. Far behind the shifting lines of the front, nestled in a shallow, windswept valley beneath the great African sky, sits a city entirely made of canvas. It is a sprawling field hospital, a sanctuary stitched together from heavy olive-drab cloth and thick wooden poles. From the outside, beneath the canopy of a million cold, glittering stars, the massive tents look like a cluster of pale, breathing fireflies. Inside each one, a small kerosene lantern burns, casting a warm, golden, amber glow against the fabric. The wind comes sweeping down from the rocky hills, a long, low moan that rustles the dry brush and flaps against the heavy canvas. Shuff! 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 It is the rhythm of the desert night. But inside these walls of cloth, the war does not exist. Inside, the world is hushed. Step through the canvas flap and into the warm, golden light. The air here is completely different from the dusty, chaotic roads. It smells of clean, pressed cotton, of sharp, sterile iodine, and of the faint, sweet aroma of peppermint tea brewing on a small iron stove in the corner. The floor is made of hard-packed earth, swept perfectly clean, and lined with long, neat rows of low cots. Upon these cots rest the boys who have carried the heaviest burdens of the invasion. They are wrapped in thick, woolen blankets, their faces pale beneath the dust, their young bodies finally, completely still. And moving between them, quiet as shadows, are the guardians of the night. They are the nurses in faded, starched aprons, and the medics with red crosses painted on their dusty helmets. They are impossibly tired. They have been awake for days, living on nothing but cold coffee and sheer, stubborn willpower. Their feet ache with a deep, throbbing heaviness. The dark circles under their eyes are testaments to the terrible things they have witnessed. Yet, as they walk down the narrow aisles between the sleeping men, they do not move with the heavy, dragging steps of the defeated. They move with a profound, delicate, and beautiful grace. They are the weavers of peace. Down one of the narrow aisles, a young nurse stops beside a cot. She is a girl from a quiet, rainy town in the Pacific Northwest, far from this arid continent. She stands perfectly still, listening. The boy in the cot is caught in the terrible grip of a fever. He is shivering, his head tossing back and forth against the thin, flat pillow. He is muttering in his sleep, his voice a frantic, broken whisper. He is calling out to a brother he left behind, begging him to wait by the edge of a creek. He is lost in a dark, confusing dream, thousands of miles from the safety of his own bed. The nurse does not wake him with a sudden touch. She knows that the waking world is sometimes just as frightening as the dream. Instead, she turns to a small wooden table and pours a shallow pool of water from a metal canteen into a tin basin. The sound of the water trickling is a soft, soothing melody in the quiet tent. She takes a clean, white cloth and dips it into the cool water. She wrings it out slowly, methodically. She kneels beside his cot, bringing her face close to his. "I am here," she whispers. Her voice is a gentle, melodic hum, softer than the desert wind outside. "You don't need to run anymore. You can rest." She places the damp, cool cloth across his burning forehead. The relief is instantaneous. The boy takes a sudden, deep gasp of air, and then, slowly, his shivering begins to subside. The frantic tossing of his head stops. He leans into the coolness of the cloth, his tight, anxious muscles finally unwinding. The nurse stays there, kneeling on the hard earth, and begins to softly stroke the side of his face with her thumb. Smooth, and hold. Smooth, and hold. She becomes the physical tether that pulls him out of the nightmare. She does not leave his side until his breathing deepens, falling into a slow, rhythmic, and peaceful slumber. Across the ward, in a corner where the amber light barely reaches, a medic is sitting on a repurposed ammunition crate. The crate is hard and uncomfortable, but he does not notice. He is sitting beside a soldier whose chest is heavily wrapped in thick, white bandages. The wounded boy is awake. He is staring up at the slanted canvas roof, his eyes wide and bright with a silent, consuming fear. It is the deep, existential terror of the dark hours, the terrifying quiet where a mind can turn entirely upon itself. The pain in his chest is a constant, heavy weight, but it is the loneliness that hurts the most. He is a boy from the crowded, noisy streets of a big city, and the vast, echoing silence of the African night is terrifying to him. The medic sees this. He understands it completely. He is just a boy himself, a farm kid who used to be afraid of the dark loft in his father's barn. He knows that in moments of profound fear, words are often useless. Promises of tomorrow ring hollow when the night feels like it will never end. So, the medic simply leans forward. He reaches out his rough, calloused hand, stained with iodine and the pale dust of the roads, and he gently wraps his fingers around the wounded boy's hand. He squeezes, just once. A firm, solid, and undeniable pressure. "I am with you," the touch says. "You are not alone in the dark. I will sit right here, and I will hold the night back for you." The wounded soldier turns his head. He looks at the medic, his eyes shining with unshed tears. He slowly curls his own fingers, gripping the medic's hand with surprising, desperate strength. He holds on as if that hand is the only solid thing left in the entire universe. The medic does not pull away. He simply nods, a quiet vow of presence, and settles deeper onto his wooden crate. They sit together in the absolute quiet, two strangers from different worlds, bound together by the profound, simple heroism of a shared breath and a held hand. As the hours stretch toward the middle of the night, the hospital tent becomes a temple of quiet murmurs. In another aisle, bathed in the soft, flickering light of a single candle, a different nurse is sitting on the edge of a canvas cot. The soldier resting there has a thick layer of white gauze wrapped entirely over his eyes. He is resting in complete, unbroken darkness. He cannot see the warm light of the candle, or the gentle, compassionate face of the woman sitting beside him. He shifts slightly, reaching a trembling hand toward his breast pocket. He pulls out a piece of paper, folded and worn soft at the edges. "Could you read this to me?" he asks, his voice a dry, fragile rasp. "It's from my wife. I need to hear it." "Of course," the nurse whispers. She takes the letter from him with absolute reverence. It is a sacred text. She unfolds it carefully, smoothing the creases over her apron. She leans closer to the candle, her eyes scanning the delicate, sloping handwriting. She clears her throat, and she begins to read. She does not just read the words, she breathes life into them. She softens her voice, filling it with all the warmth, love, and longing she can muster. She becomes the voice of the woman sitting on a front porch thousands of miles away. She reads about the autumn leaves turning bright gold in the front yard. She reads about the smell of cinnamon apples baking in the oven. She reads the sweet, mundane details of a world that is safe, whole, and waiting for him. "I am keeping the porch light on for you," the nurse reads softly into the quiet tent. "I love you more than the stars in the sky. Come home to me." The blindfolded soldier smiles. It is a small, beautiful curving of his lips. A single tear escapes from beneath the white gauze, tracking a slow, clean line down his dusty cheek. He lets out a long, shuddering sigh of pure relief. The words have built a bridge across the ocean, carrying him out of the hospital tent and placing him right in the center of his own kitchen. "Thank you," he whispers, his voice thick with emotion. The nurse carefully folds the letter and tucks it gently back into his pocket, right over his heart. "She is waiting for you," she murmurs. "You just rest now. Gather your strength." These are the unseen victories of the invasion. There are no medals awarded for sitting up all night. There are no grand parades for the washing of a feverish face or the reading of a letter in the dark. But the heroism inside these canvas walls is absolute. It is the purest, most beautiful form of human endurance. These men and women, these exhausted healers, act as a massive, collective shield against the sorrow of the world. They absorb the fear, the pain, and the homesickness of thousands of boys, and in return, they give away their own warmth. They give away their sleep. They give away pieces of their own hearts, pouring empathy into every cup of water and every changed bandage. Outside, the African night begins to slowly tip toward the morning. The deep, velvety black of the sky softens into a pale, bruised violet. The wind finally begins to settle, no longer howling against the heavy canvas, but sighing gently through the guy lines and the wooden pegs. Inside the tent, the kerosene lanterns are twisted down, their amber flames shrinking to tiny, glowing embers. The pain medications have finally taken hold. The restless tossing has ceased. The ward is filled with the deep, slow, and incredibly peaceful sound of synchronized breathing. The boys are finally resting. The young medic is still sitting on his wooden crate. His head has dropped to his chest, his chin resting on his chest, but his hand is still firmly, securely wrapped around the hand of the sleeping soldier beside him. He has not let go. The nurse from the Pacific Northwest walks softly down the aisle. She carries a small, steaming tin cup of peppermint tea. She stops beside the sleeping medic, gently touching his shoulder to wake him just enough. She hands him the warm cup. They share a look, entirely devoid of words, a look of profound, shared understanding. They have made it through another night. They have kept the shadows at bay. This is the quiet grace of the healing hands. They are the soft landing when the world falls apart. They are the gentle murmurs in the dark, the cool cloth on the burning skin, the steadfast anchor in the swirling storm. You can let your own shoulders drop now. Listen to the slow, steady breathing of the sleeping tent. In. Out. In. Out. Feel the warmth of the amber light fading into a soft, protective glow. The air is still. The world is quiet. Remember that no matter how dark the night becomes, there are always hands waiting to hold yours. There is always someone to keep the porch light on. Close your eyes. Let the heavy, soothing silence of the canvas sanctuary wash over you. You are completely safe. You are watched over. Sink deeply into the warmth of your own bed, and let the gentle, healing peace of the night carry you softly, beautifully, into sleep. Time is the gentlest ocean, smoothing the sharpest stones of history until only the quiet truth remains. Walk with me, now, along the edge of the continent, where the golden sands of North Africa meet the endless, shimmering blue of the sea. The sun is beginning its slow, graceful descent, casting a path of brilliant, liquid light across the water. The air is warm and fragrant, carrying the sweet, earthy scent of coastal pine, dried jasmine, and the clean, ancient salt of the Mediterranean. There is a profound, unshakable peace here. If you were to stand on this beach today and look out at the gentle, rolling surf, you would see no shadows of the past. The grand, terrifying armada of steel leviathans is gone, swallowed completely by the vastness of time. The heavy, square shapes of the landing crafts have vanished. In their place, small, brightly painted wooden fishing boats bob softly on the tide, their nets pulled up for the evening, resting like tired wings after a long day of flight. The earth possesses a beautiful, miraculous capacity to heal. Decades have passed since the dark waters churned with the anxiety of thousands of young men. In all those years, the tide has come in, and the tide has gone out, twice a day, every single day. Millions of waves have washed over these shores. With every gentle sweep of water, the heavy footprints of the soldiers were softened. With every retreat of the sea, the deep grooves of the tires and the sharp scars of the iron ramps were pulled away, carried out into the deep, and dispersed into nothingness. The beach was swept clean, returned to its smooth, perfect, golden state. Where young men once waded through the freezing, terrifying dark, children now run laughing in the warm shallows of the afternoon sun. They chase the seagulls that swoop and glide on the coastal thermals. They build intricate, fragile castles out of the wet sand, decorating them with smooth bits of sea glass and pale, spiraled shells. They do not know the history beneath their bare, dancing feet. And that is exactly as it should be. That is the beautiful, quiet victory of the boys who waded ashore so long ago. They walked through the dark so that the generations after them could simply play in the light. Move inland with the evening breeze, away from the water and up into the rolling hills and ancient olive groves. The landscape here has forgiven the intrusion of the marching boots and the heavy wheels. The shallow trenches, dug with frantic, blistered hands in the freezing rain, have been completely reclaimed by the earth. They are filled now with wild, swaying grass, vibrant red poppies, and the soft, silver leaves that drop from the ancient olive trees. The wind blows through the branches, creating a gentle, rustling melody, a lullaby for the soil that has returned to rest. The stone farmhouses where hesitant, tragic skirmishes once took place still stand, but their walls are no longer marked by fear. The white plaster has been smoothed over, baked by thousands of sunny days. Through their open windows, you can hear the beautiful, ordinary sounds of daily life. The clinking of porcelain teacups. The low, melodic murmur of a family gathering around a wooden table for the evening meal. The soft, rhythmic breathing of a hound sleeping on the warm front step. The war was only a fleeting shadow that passed over this land. The light of ordinary, enduring human life has stubbornly and beautifully reclaimed every inch. In the winding, narrow streets of the Medinas in Algiers and Casablanca, the lanterns are lit once again. They cast their warm, jewel-toned light, ruby, emerald, and amber, against the white stucco walls, just as they did on that first night of peace. The grandson of the baker who once tossed a crust of bread to a stray dog in the uncertain twilight is now an old man himself. He stands in the exact same doorway, wiping his flour-dusted hands on a linen apron, breathing in the scent of sweet yeast and warm honey. He looks down the alleyway, watching the neighbors greet one another with hands placed gently over their hearts. The fear that once hung heavy in this air has entirely evaporated. It has been replaced by the quiet, enduring grace of a community that knows the profound value of a peaceful evening. But if the physical scars of the land have faded, what remains of the young men who came from across the ocean? Their truth is not found in the rusting relics of machinery or the crumbling stone of old coastal batteries. Their truth is found in far more fragile, beautiful things. It is found in the things they carried in their hearts and the words they left behind. Half a world away, in a quiet, dusty attic illuminated by a single shaft of afternoon sunlight, sits a small wooden box made of fragrant cedar. Inside this box is a stack of thin, delicate paper, tied together with a faded silk ribbon. A woman, the granddaughter of a young soldier who once marched through the African dust, gently unties the ribbon. She unfolds the top letter. The paper is soft, the creases worn fragile by time. She traces the sloping, faded blue ink with her fingertips. She can see the tiny, smudged circle where a single drop of sweat, or perhaps a tear, fell onto the page as her grandfather sat on the hood of a dusty Jeep. She reads the words he wrote by the light of a kerosene lantern. She reads about the brilliant, bruised purple of the African sunset. She reads his profound, desperate longing for the old oak tree in the front yard. She reads the quiet, steady promise of his love. As she holds that delicate piece of history, the distance between the past and the present completely collapses. The great, sweeping narrative of the conflict falls away, leaving only the pure, undeniable essence of a boy who loved his family enough to walk into the dark for them. The letter is a piece of his soul, perfectly preserved, untouched by the rust or the rain. It is proof that while armies eventually pack their tents and sail away, love is the only thing that truly endures. Love is the only thing that stays. The legacy of the young men who crossed the ocean is not a legacy of conquest. It is a legacy of shared humanity. It is the memory of a boy from a rainy forest sharing his warm canteen with a tired miner. It is the echo of an American soldier offering a sweet piece of chocolate to a frightened child in a sunlit square. It is the quiet heroism of a nurse holding the hand of a stranger in the deepest, darkest hour of the night, whispering that he was not alone. These small, beautiful moments of grace are the true architecture of peace. They are the invisible, unbreakable threads that weave the world back together when it has been torn apart. Those boys were not invincible heroes made of stone. They were incredibly human. They were terrified, they were homesick, and they were utterly exhausted. They shivered in the cold surf, they wept quietly in the dark hulls of the transport ships, and they dreamed desperately of the soft beds and the warm kitchens they had left behind. But they kept walking. They put one heavy, blistered foot in front of the other, leaning on the shoulders of the strangers beside them, carrying the weight of the world until they could finally lay it down. Some of those boys returned across the ocean, carrying the memory of the golden sand and the white cities within them for the rest of their lives. They went back to their farms, their noisy cities, and their quiet towns. They became fathers and grandfathers, sitting on front porches in the evening, sometimes looking out at the horizon and remembering the sound of the desert wind. And some of those boys never left the shores of North Africa. They are resting there still, beneath the vast, beautiful, and eternally peaceful sky. They sleep in quiet, manicured fields where the grass is always green and the white marble catches the golden light of the dawn. They are guarded by the ancient olive trees and the gentle, sweeping breeze of the Mediterranean. They are forever young, forever held in the warm embrace of the earth they helped to heal. They are not forgotten. The wind whispers their names, carrying their quiet courage across the rolling hills and out over the deep, blue water. As the night finally falls over the coast, the world grows incredibly still. The white cities glow softly under the light of a silver moon. The dunes of the desert cool, settling into their ancient, shifting slumber. Listen to the sound of the ocean. It is the oldest lullaby in the world. It is the sound of the earth breathing. Shush! 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 The waves rise gently, curling into ribbons of pale, glowing foam, and slide softly up the golden beach. Then, with a long, slow sigh, the water pulls back, slipping away into the deep. In. Out. In. Out. It is the rhythm of absolute peace. It is the rhythm of a world that has been washed clean. You can let go now. You have traveled across the dark, freezing ocean. You have walked the dusty, sun-baked roads. You have sat in the quiet, amber light of the healing tents, and you have seen the incredible, resilient beauty of the human heart. The journey is over. The heavy backpacks have been set down in the dust. The rifles have been traded for cups of warm tea. The letters have all been safely delivered. There is nothing left to carry. Feel the tension leaving your shoulders, melting away like the shadows retreating from the morning sun. Let your breathing slow down, matching the gentle, rhythmic rising and falling of the tide. Breathe in the cool, clean night air. Breathe out the worries of the day. The footprint you leave upon the world does not need to be deep or heavy. It only needs to be kind. The earth will eventually wash away the marks we make, but the warmth we give to one another, the shared canteen, the held hand, the gentle word spoken in the dark, that warmth echoes forever. It becomes part of the wind. It becomes part of the light. The story is finished. The lanterns in the Medinas are burning low, casting a soft, protective glow over the sleeping world. The soldiers are resting in the quiet fields, their dreams completely undisturbed. The ocean is watching over the shore, singing its endless, soothing song. Shush! Shush! You are safe. You are held in the quiet, gentle embrace of the night. Let the peaceful wind wash over you, carrying you away from the waking world. Sink deeply into the warmth of your bed, as soft and welcoming as the golden sand. Close your eyes. Let the rhythm of the tide carry you out into the calm, quiet waters of sleep. Rest now. The dawn is far away, the world is at peace, and you can finally, beautifully, sleep.